The blind date trap. When office bullies tried to destroy a single dad, but created a love story instead. Three jealous coworkers huddle in a corner booth, phones hidden but recording, smirks barely contained. They've orchestrated the perfect trap. Their company's golden boy, the widowed single dad everyone loves, set up on a blind date with a deaf woman. They're waiting for him to fumble, to show discomfort, to reveal some hidden prejudice they can capture and weaponize. What they don't know is that Caleb Hart learned sign language years ago, for reasons that haunt him still. And when Lena Brooks walks through that door, everything is about to change. If you want to see how a cruel prank becomes the most beautiful second chance, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The October rain came down in sheets against the windows of Marcello's, the kind of upscale Italian restaurant where the lighting was deliberately dim and the prices were deliberately high. It was the sort of place where couples celebrated anniversaries, where business deals were sealed over expensive wine, where everything was designed to impress. In booth 7, tucked away in the corner where the lighting was even dimmer, 3 people sat with their phones positioned just so, angled to capture the table near the window without being obvious about it. To any casual observer, they looked like friends enjoying happy hour, but their eyes weren't on each other. They were locked on table 12, where a man sat alone checking his watch with the nervous energy of someone on a first date. "He's early," Marcus Chen whispered, his phone propped against the breadbasket at an angle that would capture everything. Typical Caleb, probably been here 20 minutes already. "Golden boy never keeps anyone waiting," Jennifer Walsh added, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she adjusted her own phone behind her water glass. "Heaven forbid perfect Caleb Hart shows up anything less than 10 minutes early." The third member of their group, Derek Simmons, leaned back with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "You think she'll actually show? I mean, the profile said, 'She'll show,'" Marcus cut him off. "I confirmed with her this morning. Told her all about this amazing guy who'd been asking about her. Really talked him up. She thinks this is real." Jennifer's laugh was quiet but cruel. And when she realizes he has no idea how to handle her situation, when he gets that look on his face, we'll have it all on video. Send it to Reynolds before the promotion announcement, and suddenly Mr. Perfect doesn't look so perfect anymore. They'd planned this for weeks. Ever since Tom Reynolds, their department head, had announced that someone would be promoted to senior project manager, and everyone knew Caleb Hart was the favorite. It didn't matter that Caleb had worked 80-hour weeks to pull their last project from the brink of disaster. It didn't matter that he'd mentored half the junior staff, that he covered shifts when people called in sick, that he treated the maintenance crew with the same respect he showed the executives. What mattered was that Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek all wanted that promotion. What mattered was that they'd been at the company longer, worked just as hard, harder, they told themselves. And they were tired of watching Caleb Hart collect praise like it was his birthright. So they'd crafted the perfect trap. A blind date, arranged through a mutual friend's recommendation. They'd selected Lena Brooks carefully, a talented graphic designer, beautiful, intelligent, and deaf. Not because her disability was a problem, but because they were counting on Caleb to treat it like one. One awkward moment, one uncomfortable silence, one instance of him clearly wishing he were somewhere else. That's all they needed. They'd edit the footage, add some captions, and suddenly the narrative would shift. Caleb Hart, the man everyone admired, revealed as someone who couldn't handle difference, who saw disability as a burden. It was cruel. It was calculated. And they'd convinced themselves it was justified. Caleb Hart sat at table 12, his fingers drumming against his water glass, and tried to remember why he'd agreed to this. His younger sister Emma had been pestering him for months about getting back out there, about not letting his entire life revolve around work and Maisie. When she'd told him about a friend of a friend who might be perfect for him, he'd finally relented. One date, just to get Emma off his back. He'd arrived early because he was always early, a habit from his military days that he'd never quite shaken, even though he'd been out for nearly a decade. Early meant prepared. Early meant control. And tonight, with his nerves jangling and his palms slightly damp, he needed whatever control he could find. It had been 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years since cancer had stolen his wife, his partner, the center of his world. 3 years of learning to be both mother and father to their daughter Maisie, of navigating parent-teacher conferences alone, of watching his little girl grow up and wishing Sarah could see it. He'd thrown himself into work because work was manageable. Work had clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Work didn't require him to be vulnerable. But Emma was right about one thing. He was lonely. The kind of lonely that crept up in the quiet moments when Maisie was asleep and the house was too still, when he'd reach for his phone to text Sarah about something funny their daughter had said, only to remember all over again that she was gone. So here he was, 36 years old, wearing the navy blazer Emma had insisted made him look approachable, waiting for a woman he'd never met, and wondering if he'd completely lost his mind. The restaurant door opened, letting in a gust of wind and rain, and Caleb looked up automatically. A woman stood in the entrance, shaking water from her umbrella, and something in his chest tightened. She was beautiful. Not in the polished, high-maintenance way that made him nervous, but in a way that seemed entirely natural, like she'd spent zero time worrying about impressing anyone. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, damp from the rain. She wore jeans and an emerald green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, and there was something about the way she moved, careful, observant, taking in the entire restaurant before she approached the hostess stand. The hostess gestured toward his table, and the woman's gaze found him. For a moment, she just stood there, and Caleb felt himself being assessed with an intensity that was both unnerving and somehow flattering. Then she nodded once and started walking toward him. That's when he noticed it. The way she moved through the restaurant, her eyes tracking not just him but everything in her path. The slight tilt of her head as she navigated between tables. The complete absence of reaction when the hostess spoke to her from behind. In the corner booth, Marcus nudged Jennifer. "Here we go," he breathed, his finger hovering over the record button. Caleb stood as she approached, his military training kicking in automatically, and watched her eyes widen slightly at the gesture. Then she was in front of him, and he could see the wariness in her expression, the look of someone who'd been disappointed before and was bracing for it to happen again. Without thinking, without pausing to second-guess himself, Caleb lifted his hands and signed, "Hello, I'm Caleb. It's nice to meet you." The change in her face was instantaneous. The guarded expression shattered, replaced by shock so complete she actually took a step back. Her hands flew up automatically, responding before she could think. "You sign?" "I do." Caleb pulled out her chair, waiting until she sat before returning to his own seat. His hands continued moving as he spoke aloud, knowing from years of practice how to do both simultaneously. "I hope this is okay. Emma told me a little about you, but I wasn't sure if you preferred signing or if you read lips or—" He paused, realizing he was nervous talking, something he hadn't done in years. "I'm sorry. I'm a little out of practice with this whole dating thing." In the corner booth, Jennifer's mouth had fallen open. "What the hell?" she hissed. "Shut up," Marcus snapped, adjusting his phone angle frantically. "This is fine. He's probably terrible at it. Just give it a minute." But Derek was already leaning forward, his eyes narrowed. "Wait, how does he know sign language?" Lena Brooks sat across from Caleb Hart and tried to process what was happening. In the 32 years she'd been deaf, in the countless times well-meaning friends had set her up with perfect guys who were supposedly totally cool with it, not once had someone already known sign language. Not once had someone stood when she approached, pulled out her chair, and started signing with the kind of fluency that only came from years of practice. "Your practice seems pretty good to me," she signed back, then forced herself to add, "I do read lips too, but this is better, clearer." The relief on his face was genuine, and despite every defensive wall she'd built over the years, Lena felt something in her chest soften. He had kind eyes, brown, warm, with smile lines at the corners that suggested he used them often. And his hands, when they moved, were confident without being showy. This wasn't someone who'd learned a few phrases to impress her. This was someone who actually knew what he was doing. "Can I ask how you learned?" she signed, then immediately regretted it. Too personal, too soon. She was always doing this, pushing when she should be patient, demanding honesty when most people preferred comfortable lies. But Caleb didn't flinch from the question. Instead, his expression grew more serious, and when his hands moved again, there was a weight to them. My daughter Maisie had a friend in kindergarten, Lily. She was deaf, and Maisie was so frustrated that they couldn't play together easily. So I learned. We both did. Me and my wife. His hands paused, and Lena saw grief flicker across his face. My late wife, Sarah. She passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Lena's signs were immediate, instinctive. She'd been through enough loss to recognize it in someone else. How old is Maisie now? 7. And she doesn't remember most of her sign language anymore. Lily's family moved away the next year, but I kept practicing because... He trailed off, and Lena watched him search for words. It felt important, like something I should maintain just in case. Just in case he met someone like her, Lena thought. Just in case his daughter made another friend who needed it. Just in case the world required him to be more than what he'd been. That kind of thoughtfulness was rare. That kind of intentional growth was even rarer. What about you? Caleb's hands continued, and his voice carried alongside them in a way that made her want to watch his lips just to see them move. Emma said you're a graphic designer? The server appeared then, a young woman with excellent posture and a practiced smile who clearly hadn't noticed anything unusual about their table. She launched into her special speech while simultaneously placing menus down, and Lena felt the familiar tension creep into her shoulders. This was always the moment when things got awkward, when her date would have to explain her deafness to the server, when everyone would start talking too loudly or too slowly, when the careful pretense of normalcy would crack. But Caleb was already moving. He waited for the server to finish, then said clearly, "Thank you. My friend is deaf. She reads lips very well, but if you could face her when taking her order, that would be helpful." Not date? Friend? Taking the pressure off, making it casual. And his tone was so matter-of-fact, so free of apology or discomfort, that the server just nodded like this was completely routine. "Of course," she said, turning to Lena with a genuine smile. "What can I get you to drink?" Lena ordered a glass of white wine, watching the server's lips carefully, then added, "And could we have a few more minutes with the menu?" "Absolutely. Take your time." As the server walked away, Caleb leaned forward slightly. "Was that okay? The way I said it? I didn't want to speak for you, but I also didn't want her to just talk at me the whole time you're sitting here." The consideration in that question made Lena's throat tight. "It was perfect," she signed. "Most people either ignore my deafness completely and get frustrated when I can't hear them, or they make it this huge thing and talk about me like I'm not there. You just normalized it." "Because it is normal," Caleb signed back. "You're deaf. I have bad knees from too many years jumping out of helicopters. We all have our things." Lena laughed, actually laughed, and it felt like releasing breath she'd been holding for years. "You jumped out of helicopters?" "Army. 10 years, 2 tours, got out when Sarah got pregnant because I wanted to be around to raise our kid." His expression turned rueful. "Turns out I'm raising her solo anyway, but at least I'm here to do it." There was no self-pity in his voice, just statement of fact. Lena found herself leaning forward, genuinely curious now. "What do you do now?" "Project management for a tech company. Not nearly as exciting as helicopters, but the hours are better and nobody shoots at me in meetings. Usually." He grinned, and Lena felt that softness in her chest expand. "What about you? Do you work for yourself or with a firm?" For the next 20 minutes, they talked. Really talked. Not the stilted first date small talk Lena had endured on too many awkward evenings, but genuine conversation that flowed like they'd known each other for years. Caleb told her about Maisie, about his daughter's obsession with volcanoes, and her absolute conviction that she would grow up to be a volcano scientist who studied lava. Lena shared stories about her work, about difficult clients, and the satisfaction of finally nailing a design that had been eluding her. They ordered food, pasta for him, risotto for her, and kept talking through the meal. Caleb asked about her childhood, and Lena found herself sharing more than she usually did on first dates. About growing up in a hearing family who loved her but didn't always understand her. About teachers who'd treated her deafness like a tragedy to overcome rather than simply a different way of experiencing the world. About slowly building a life where she felt capable and independent, even when society kept trying to tell her she should feel limited. "That's something I think about a lot with Maisie," Caleb signed, his pasta forgotten on his fork. "Raising a daughter on my own. Everyone wants to tell me she needs a mother figure, like I'm inherently insufficient because I'm her dad. And I get it. There are things Sarah would have been better at. Woman-to-woman stuff I'm going to have to figure out as she gets older. But I refuse to believe that my daughter is damaged or lacking just because she's being raised by a single parent. You're not insufficient, Lena signed firmly. You're what she has, and from everything you've said, you're doing an amazing job. The fact that you learned sign language just so she could play with her friend? That's the kind of thing most parents wouldn't bother with. I'd do anything for that kid, Caleb said simply. She's my whole world. In the corner booth, the three coworkers were no longer smirking. This is a disaster, Jennifer hissed, watching Caleb and Lena laugh together over something on the dessert menu. They're actually hitting it off. How is this possible? I don't understand, Marcus muttered, scrolling back through his footage. He's not supposed to know sign language. This doesn't make any sense. Derek was silent, his expression troubled as he watched the couple. They'd been recording for over an hour now, and not once had Caleb shown any discomfort, any awkwardness, any sign of the prejudice they'd been counting on. Instead, he looked more relaxed than Derek had ever seen him at work. Animated, engaged, genuinely happy. Maybe we should just delete the video, Derek said quietly. This feels wrong. Wrong? Jennifer turned on him. What's wrong is Caleb getting that promotion when we've all worked just as hard. What's wrong is him getting special treatment just because everyone likes him. But look at them. Derek gestured toward table 12, where Lena was signing something that made Caleb laugh so hard he had to put down his water glass. This isn't what we thought would happen. They're having a real date, a good date. And we're sitting here recording them without their knowledge like a bunch of creeps. We're collecting evidence, Marcus insisted, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. They sat in tense silence, watching as the server brought dessert. Tiramisu for the table, 2 spoons. Watching as Caleb and Lena shared it, their conversation flowing seamlessly between sign language and spoken words. Watching as what was supposed to be a trap turned into something that looked uncomfortably like a real connection. And then Caleb's eyes drifted to the corner booth, and everything changed. He'd been peripherally aware of the booth all evening. Military training meant he never sat with his back to a door, and he always knew who was in his vicinity. He'd noticed the 3 people when he'd arrived, noted their phones positioned oddly, registered the way they kept glancing in his direction. At first, he'd dismissed it as coincidence. Maybe they were work friends taking selfies. Maybe they were creating content for social media. But something about their body language nagged at him. The way they leaned in when Lena arrived, the way they kept adjusting their phones, the way they were very deliberately not looking directly at his table while somehow remaining intensely focused on it. And then, between bites of tiramisu, he caught a glimpse of Marcus Chen's profile. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. Marcus worked in his department. So did Jennifer Walsh. He could see her now, too, half hidden behind a menu. They'd been on the project team that had just finished, the one where he'd stayed late every night for 6 weeks to meet the deadline. The one that Tom Reynolds had specifically praised his leadership on during the last all-hands meeting. The promotion. This was about the promotion. Caleb felt ice flood his veins. He set down his spoon carefully, his mind racing through the implications. They'd set this up. The blind date, the specific choice of partner, the hidden cameras. They'd been hoping he'd fail some kind of test, that he'd reveal himself as someone who couldn't handle. He looked at Lena, signing something about her favorite type of coffee. Her face more open and unguarded than it had been all evening, and rage, unlike anything he'd felt in years, surged through him. They'd used her. They'd invited her here, let her think this was real. Also, they could weaponize her deafness against both of them. Caleb? Lena's hands moved, her expression shifting to concern. Are you okay? You just went completely white. He had a choice to make. He could pretend he hadn't noticed, finish the date, deal with his coworkers later, keep Lena in the dark, protect her from the ugly truth of what this evening had been designed to be. Or he could be honest. Everything in him wanted to protect her, to shield her from hurt. But Sarah had taught him that respect meant honesty, even when honesty was hard, especially then. I need to tell you something, he signed slowly, making sure his hands were steady even though his heart was pounding. And you're probably going to be furious with me, but please let me explain everything first. Lena's expression went wary. Okay. This date, when Emma told me about it, I thought it was a genuine setup, a friend of a friend who might be interested in getting coffee. He paused, forcing himself to maintain eye contact. But I just recognized some of my coworkers in that corner booth. They've been recording us all evening. Lena's face went completely blank. What? No, I know. They set this up. They're competing with me for a promotion at work, and they've been angry that I'm the favorite. So they arranged for me to go on a blind date with someone who's deaf, hoping I'd screw it up, hoping they could catch it on video and use it against me. Each word felt like pulling glass from a wound. Caleb watched the emotions cascade across Lena's face, shock, confusion, and then, terribly, understanding. The kind of understanding that spoke to this not being her first time being used. They chose me because I'm deaf, she signed, her hands moving with the sharp, angry precision of someone barely containing their fury. They thought you'd be uncomfortable with it. They thought you'd mess up. Yes. And you didn't know. When you agreed to this date, you had no idea. Not until 30 seconds ago. Emma thought it was real too. I don't know how they managed it, but they somehow made it seem legitimate. Lena sat back in her chair, her hands dropping to her lap. For a long moment, she didn't sign, didn't speak, just stared at the remains of their tiramisu like it held answers she desperately needed. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her expression was fury. Do you know how many times this has happened to me? Her signs were sharp enough to cut. Not this exactly. Your coworkers are creative, I'll give them that. But how many times I've been on a date that turned out to be a pity thing, or a dare, or someone's misguided attempt to prove how open-minded they are? How many times I've watched a guy realize I'm deaf and suddenly remember an emergency phone call he needs to take. Lena, I'm so tired of being someone's test. Someone's opportunity to prove they're a good person by not running away from the disabled girl. I thought... Her hands faltered. I thought tonight was different. I thought you were different. I am. Caleb leaned forward, his own signs urgent now. Whatever their plan was, whatever they thought would happen, what's actually happening between us is real. I know how this sounds. I know you have every reason not to believe me. But I don't care that you're deaf. I care that you're funny and smart, and you have this way of calling me on my bullshit that reminds me of Sarah. I care that I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone new in 3 years. I care that when you laugh, I want to figure out what makes you laugh like that again. Lena shook her head, but he could see the conflict in her expression, wanting to believe him, afraid to. They're still recording us, she signed. Right now they're probably eating this up, the trap working better than they planned, because now they can show you getting emotional with the poor deaf girl, make it look however they want. Something fierce and protective rose in Caleb's chest. Then let's give them something to record. He stood up, aware of Lena's sharp intake of breath, aware of the subtle shift in energy from the corner booth as Marcus and Jennifer realized they'd been spotted. Caleb walked across the restaurant with the same steady pace he'd used approaching hostile villages in Afghanistan, completely calm, completely controlled, absolutely certain of his objective. He stopped at their booth. All three of them were frozen, their phones now obvious in their hands, guilt written across their faces. So, Caleb said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for their table to hear. How's the video looking? Get enough footage for your presentation to Tom? Jennifer found her voice first. Caleb, this isn't... You were just what? Having dinner? That would explain the phones all pointed at my table for the last 90 minutes. He glanced at Marcus. Creative plan, I'll give you that. Using someone as bait, hoping I'd reveal some hidden prejudice you could exploit. Must have been disappointing when I didn't perform according to script. You don't understand, Marcus started, but Caleb cut him off. I understand perfectly. You wanted the promotion. You thought sabotaging me was easier than earning it yourselves. And you were willing to hurt an innocent person to do it. His voice remained level, but there was steel underneath. That woman over there, Lena, she came here tonight thinking this was a real date. She's been hurt before, and she took a chance anyway. And you three decided to make her into a prop for your office politics. Derek wouldn't meet his eyes. We didn't think about it like that. No, you didn't think at all. You just acted. Caleb pulled out his phone. I want you to send me the footage. All of it. And then I want you to delete it from your devices. Right now. In front of me. You can't make us, Jennifer began. You're right. I can't. Caleb's expression was cold. But I can tell Tom Reynolds exactly what you did. I can explain how you arranged this elaborate setup, involved an innocent third party without her consent, and recorded us without permission. I'm pretty sure the legal team would have some thoughts about that. Or you can send me the files and delete them, and we can have a different conversation on Monday. The three of them exchanged glances. Then, slowly, Marcus pulled up his video file and airdropped it to Caleb's phone. Jennifer and Derek followed suit. One by one, they deleted the footage while Caleb watched. Good, he said when it was done. Now I'm going to go back to my table and try to salvage what's left of my evening. And you three are going to sit here and think very carefully about the kind of people you want to be. He walked back to table 12, aware that he'd just burned bridges he might later regret, but unable to care. When he sat down, Lena was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You didn't have to do that, she signed. Yes, I did. Caleb signed back. What they did was wrong. To both of us. But especially to you. Are you going to get in trouble at work? Maybe. Probably. He managed a rueful smile. But I've got the video files now, so if they try anything, I have evidence of what they did. And honestly, if standing up for you costs me the promotion, it wasn't worth having. Lena studied him for a long moment, and Caleb forced himself to stay still under her scrutiny, to let her see exactly who he was, flaws, anger, fierce protectiveness, and all. Finally, she signed, That was the most gallant thing anyone's ever done for me. Also possibly the most reckless. Do you always confront people who wrong you in the middle of Italian restaurants? Only on first dates, Caleb signed back. I like to make a strong impression. The laugh that escaped her was half sob, and then she was crying, really crying, tears streaming down her face while her shoulders shook. Caleb reached across the table automatically, offering his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. I'm sorry. She signed with her free hand, the movements clumsy with emotion. I'm not sad. I'm so tired of being treated like I'm broken or difficult or someone to be managed. And you just walked over there and defended me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. It was obvious. Caleb squeezed her hand gently. You deserved better than what they planned. You deserve better than a lot of things you've probably gotten. They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped across the table, while Lena composed herself. In the corner booth, Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek paid their bill and left without looking back. The server approached cautiously, clearly sensing the emotional weight at the table. Can I get you folks anything else? She asked, facing Lena as she spoke. Lena looked at Caleb, then signed, What happens now? Now, Caleb signed back. We decide if we want to let them ruin this evening or if we want to order more wine and keep talking. Because despite the absolutely insane circumstances, I've had a really good time. And I'd like to keep having a good time if you're willing. A small smile broke through Lena's tears. You're serious? After all of this, you actually want to keep the date going? I'm very serious. Look, I get it if you want to leave. This has been a lot, and you don't owe me anything. But if you stay, I promise you this. No more surprises, no more hidden agendas. Just me, genuinely interested in getting to know you better, for all the right reasons. Lena picked up her napkin, wiped her eyes, and took a deep breath. Then she signed, one condition. Name it. Next time, if there is a next time, you pick the restaurant, somewhere your coworkers definitely won't be. The relief that flooded through Caleb was so intense it made him dizzy. Deal. Though I should warn you, my favorite places are nowhere near this fancy. I'm talking food trucks and hole-in-the-wall diners. Perfect, Lena signed. I hate fancy restaurants anyway. Too much pressure to use the right fork. They ordered more wine. They talked for another hour until the restaurant staff started giving them pointed looks and clearing tables around them. And when they finally left, walking out into rain that had softened to a drizzle, Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Can I walk you to your car? He asked, his hands moving in the glow of the streetlights. I took a ride share, actually.
Then can I wait with you until it arrives? Lena smiled. You really are a gentleman, aren't you?
My mother raised me right. Also, I spent 10 years in the Army where they basically trained us to never leave anyone behind. He paused, then added, plus I'm not ready for this evening to end, crisis and all. They stood under the restaurant awning, close enough that Caleb could smell her perfume, something light and floral that suited her. Close enough that when Lena looked up at him, he could see gold flecks in her green eyes. I wasn't either, she signed. Ready for it to end, I mean. Even with the dramatic confrontation in the middle. Especially with the dramatic confrontation, Caleb signed back. What's a good date without a little workplace sabotage? Her laugh was the best sound he'd never heard. When her rideshare pulled up, Caleb opened the door for her. Before she got in, she turned back to him, her hands moving in the glow from the car's interior light.
Thank you, she signed, for standing up for me, for being honest, for not making my deafness into something weird or difficult.
Thank you for giving me a chance after everything, Caleb signed back, and for not running away when I told you the truth. Where would be the fun in that? She grinned, then signed, call me or text me if you actually want to do this again. I do. Tomorrow too soon? Way too soon. Try the day after. She climbed into the car, then rolled down the window to sign one more thing. And Caleb, your coworkers are idiots. That promotion is yours. He watched the car disappear into the night, then pulled out his phone. There were 3 missed calls from Emma, probably frantic to know how the date went. There was a text from his babysitter confirming that Maisie was asleep. And there, in his files, were the videos his coworkers had taken. Evidence of their scheme, yes, but also evidence of something else entirely. Evidence of a connection neither of them had expected, forged in the most unlikely circumstances. Caleb started walking toward his own car, his mind already spinning with what Monday would bring. The confrontation with Tom Reynolds, the conversation he'd need to have with Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek. The potential fallout from everything that had happened tonight. But underneath the worry was something stronger. The memory of Lena's laugh, the warmth in her eyes when she'd told him not to call tomorrow, the way his daughter would react when he told her he'd met someone who might, just might, be special. 3 years ago, cancer had stolen his wife and shattered his world. Tonight, 3 jealous coworkers had tried to use cruelty to advance their careers. And somehow, impossibly, both tragedies had led him to a moment of genuine connection, to a woman who challenged him, who made him laugh, who saw through all his defenses to the person he was trying to be. His phone buzzed. Text from Lena. Made it home safe. Thanks for tonight. All of it. Caleb smiled and typed back. Thanks for staying. See you day after tomorrow. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, it's a date. A real one this time. The realest, he confirmed. As Caleb drove home through the rain-slicked streets, past closed shops and darkened windows, past other people's lives unfolding in lit apartments, he felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Not just hope. Certainty. Certainty that what had started as someone else's cruel joke had become the beginning of his own second chance. Certainty that Lena Brooks, with her guarded heart and quick laugh and absolute refusal to be anyone's victim, was exactly the kind of person worth taking a risk for. And certainty that come Monday morning, when he walked into that office, he'd face whatever consequences came his way with the same steady conviction he'd shown tonight. Because some things, some people, were worth fighting for, worth defending, worth choosing, again and again, regardless of the cost. The rain picked up again as he pulled into his driveway, sheets of water reflecting his headlights. But Caleb didn't run for the house. Instead, he sat in his car for a moment, replaying the evening, committing every detail to memory. The way Lena's hands moved when she signed, the shock on Marcus's face when he'd been confronted, the feeling of absolute rightness when he'd taken Lena's hand across the table. Tomorrow he'd deal with work. Tomorrow he'd figure out how to explain this to Maisie. Tomorrow he'd text Lena and start planning their next date. Their real first date, unmarred by hidden cameras and office politics. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, Caleb Hart let himself believe that the worst thing that had happened to him might not be the end of his story.
It might just be the bridge to something better, something real, something worth every risk, every confrontation, every moment of vulnerability. Tonight, the rain came down and washed everything clean, and Caleb, standing on his porch with his key in the lock, looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Sarah. I think I'm going to be okay." The house was dark and quiet. Inside, his daughter slept, dreaming of volcanoes. And somewhere across the city, Lena Brooks was probably getting ready for bed, maybe replaying the evening herself, maybe wondering if he was really as genuine as he seemed. Monday would bring its challenges. But right now, in this moment, Caleb let himself simply feel grateful. Grateful for Emma's interference. Grateful for his coworker's failed scheme. Grateful for sign language learned years ago for a little girl's friendship. Grateful for Lena's courage in staying when she had every reason to leave. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, already thinking about the conversation he'd have with his daughter in the morning. Maisie had been begging for him to find someone to be friends with again, her 7-year-old way of suggesting he needed more in his life than just work and parenting. And now, finally, he'd have something to tell her. He'd met someone special, someone who made him laugh and made him want to be brave, someone who'd been through her own struggles and had emerged strong and unbreakable, someone who, despite being used as bait in someone else's trap, had chosen to give him a chance anyway. As Caleb locked the door behind him and headed upstairs to check on Maisie, he felt the last of his defenses finally begin to lower. Not all the way. 3 years of grief had taught him to be careful, to protect his heart and his daughters. But enough to let possibility in. Enough to imagine a future that included more than just survival. Enough to believe that love, when you least expected it, could find you in the most unlikely places. Even in the middle of someone else's cruel joke. Even on a rainy October night, in an overpriced Italian restaurant, surrounded by people who wished you harm. Sometimes, Caleb thought as he stood in Maisie's doorway watching her sleep, the universe had a sense of humor. Sometimes it took your worst moment and turned it into your best chance. Sometimes it gave you exactly what you needed, disguised as exactly what you feared. And sometimes, just sometimes, the blind date from hell turned out to be the beginning of everything you'd been too scared to hope for. The weekend arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made Seattle feel almost magical. Saturday morning found Caleb in his kitchen, making pancakes while Maisie sat at the counter doing her homework, or rather pretending to do her homework while actually drawing elaborate volcano diagrams in the margins of her math worksheet. "Dad," she said without looking up from her drawing, "why are you humming?" Caleb paused mid-flip, the spatula hovering over the griddle. "Was I humming?" "You've been humming since yesterday, and you smiled at your phone like 6 times last night." Maisie looked up, her brown eyes, Sarah's eyes, sharp with 7-year-old intuition. Did something good happen? He should have known better than to think he could hide anything from his daughter. Maisie had spent the first 4 years of her life learning to read her mother's pain levels and moods, had become an expert at sensing when adults were keeping things from her. It was both a blessing and a curse. She was remarkably empathetic for her age, but she also worried more than any child should. "Something good happened," Caleb confirmed, sliding a pancake onto her plate. "I met someone interesting." "Like a friend?" "Maybe. It's too early to tell." He poured more batter onto the griddle, aware of Maisie's scrutiny. "We went to dinner on Thursday night. Emma set it up." "Aunt Emma is always trying to set you up with people," Maisie observed, drowning her pancake in syrup with the enthusiasm only children possess. "Remember that lady from her book club, the one who kept talking about her cats?" "I remember." Caleb suppressed a shudder. That date had lasted exactly 45 minutes before he'd invented an emergency with the hot water heater. This was different. Different how? How could he explain it to a 7-year-old? How could he describe the feeling of recognition, of possibility, of finding someone who challenged and intrigued him in equal measure? "She's kind," he said finally, "and funny, and she doesn't let me get away with anything." Maisie considered this, chewing thoughtfully. "Mom didn't let you get away with anything either." "No, she didn't." The familiar ache of missing Sarah pulsed through him, but gentler than usual. "Your mom was the best at calling me on my nonsense." "Are you going to see her again? The new person?" "Tomorrow, actually, if that's okay with you. Mrs. Chen said she could stay a little later." "It's okay." Maisie returned to her drawing,
adding what appeared to be flowing lava. Then, casually, as if the question didn't carry enormous weight, "Does she know about Mom?" Caleb sat down beside his daughter, leaving the last pancake to cook itself. "She does. I told her on our first date. She lost people too, so she understood." "Good." Maisie nodded firmly. "It's important that people know about Mom, so they don't think they have to replace her or anything." The wisdom in that statement made Caleb's chest tight. At 7 years old, his daughter already understood what some adults never learned: that grief didn't mean you couldn't love again, that remembering the past didn't mean you couldn't embrace the future. Sarah would have been so proud of the person Maisie was becoming. "Nobody could replace your mom," Caleb said quietly. "Not ever. But that doesn't mean we can't make room for new people in our lives. You understand that, right? Like when Lily moved away and I was sad, but then Jordan became my friend, and that was good too?" "Exactly like that." Maisie smiled, then wrinkled her nose. "Dad, your pancake is burning." Sunday evening, Caleb found himself more nervous than he'd been before the first date. He'd spent an embarrassing amount of time selecting what to wear, eventually settling on jeans and a Henley that Emma had once told him made him look approachable but not trying too hard. And he'd checked his phone approximately every 90 seconds to make sure he hadn't missed a text from Lena. They'd decided on a food truck festival in Georgetown, the kind of casual, outdoor setting where conversation could flow naturally and there was no pressure to maintain formal dinner etiquette. Also, crucially, it was nowhere near Marcello's or anywhere his coworkers might frequent. Caleb arrived early, as usual, and spent the extra time walking the perimeter of the festival grounds. Food trucks lined the streets: Thai, Mexican, Korean barbecue, gourmet grilled cheese, everything you could imagine. The air smelled like a dozen different cuisines competing for dominance, and the crowd was the perfect Seattle mix of young families, college students, and older couples enjoying the unexpectedly warm October evening. "You look nervous," someone signed in his peripheral vision, and Caleb turned to find Lena approaching, a smile playing at her lips. "Been waiting long?" She wore jeans and a rust-colored jacket that made her dark hair seem even darker, and Caleb felt that same jolt of attraction he'd experienced at Marcello's. But this time, without the shadow of his coworker's scheme hanging over them, it felt cleaner, simpler. "Just got here," he signed back, then added aloud, knowing she was watching his lips. "You look beautiful." "You look less like you're about to confront someone in the middle of a restaurant," Lena signed, her eyes sparkling, though I have to admit that was pretty impressive. I try to limit my dramatic restaurant confrontations to once per relationship," Caleb signed. "Keeps things interesting but not exhausting." They started walking through the festival, weaving between groups of people clustered around picnic tables. Caleb was hyper-aware of the noise level, live music from a nearby stage, the general din of conversation, vendors calling out their specials. He'd researched deaf accessibility before coming, wanted to make sure Lena would be comfortable, but now he worried he'd chosen wrong. "Is this okay?" he signed, gesturing to the crowd. "I didn't think about how loud it would be. We can go somewhere quieter if you want." Lena's expression softened. "This is perfect, and I appreciate you thinking about it, but crowds don't bother me the way they bother hearing people. I'm not trying to filter out background noise because there is no background noise for me. It's actually kind of peaceful." "I never thought about it that way. Most people don't." She stepped closer as a group of teenagers barreled past. "So what are you in the mood for? And please don't say something boring like a hamburger." "I was thinking Korean barbecue tacos," Caleb signed. "There's a truck here that's supposed to be incredible, but we should get at least 3 different things and share, right? That's the whole point of food truck festivals." "A man after my own heart," Lena grinned. "Okay, Korean barbecue tacos definitely. What else?" They spent the next 20 minutes moving from truck to truck, assembling what Lena called a feast of questionable decision-making. Korean barbecue tacos, Thai coconut curry in a bread bowl, gourmet mac and cheese with pulled pork, and, because Lena insisted, deep-fried Oreos for dessert. They found a relatively quiet spot at a picnic table away from the main stage and spread their haul out between them. "This is going to be a disaster for my digestive system," Caleb signed, eyeing the spread. "Worth it, though. You're military. Didn't you eat worse things in the Army?"
I ate things that came in brown plastic bags and tasted like regret. This is gourmet by comparison. He picked up a taco, then paused. Wait, before we eat, I need to ask something. Lena's expression turned wary. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just important. Caleb set down the taco, his hands moving with careful deliberation. Thursday night was intense, and I know I said I wanted to do this again, but I need to make sure you actually want to be here, that you're not just being polite or giving me another chance out of some sense of obligation. For a moment, Lena just looked at him. Then she signed. You really don't understand, do you? Understand what? How rare you are. Her hands moved slowly, emphasizing each word. I've been on a lot of first dates, Caleb. A lot. And most of them fall into one of three categories. There's the guy who didn't know I was deaf and makes an excuse to leave within 5 minutes. There's the guy who knew but treats me like I'm made of glass, speaking really slowly and acting like I'm brave just for existing. And then there's the guy who makes a big show of how okay he is with my disability, like he deserves a medal for being decent. She paused, picking up her own taco but not eating it. You didn't do any of those things. You just treated me like a person you were interested in getting to know. And when your coworkers tried to use me to hurt you, you didn't make it about yourself. You got angry on my behalf. You stood up for me without making me into a victim or a cause. That's just basic human decency, Caleb signed. It's really not. Lena's expression was serious now. So yes, I want to be here. I'm not being polite, and I'm definitely not here out of obligation. I'm here because Thursday night, even with all the drama, was the best first date I've ever had. And I'm hoping tonight might be even better, now that nobody's secretly filming us. The relief that flooded through Caleb was profound. Okay, good. I just needed to hear you say it. Now can we eat these tacos before they get cold? They ate and talked and ate some more. Caleb told stories about Maisie, about her volcano obsession that had started with a library book and had somehow evolved into her demanding they build a working model in the backyard. Lena shared the frustration and triumph of being a freelance designer, of difficult clients who wanted miracles on impossible timelines, of the satisfaction when a project finally clicked into place. What made you want to work for yourself? Caleb asked, signing with one hand while attempting to eat mac and cheese with the other, a coordination challenge that made Lena laugh. Control, mostly. She set down her food so she could sign properly. When I worked at design firms, there was always this undercurrent of them not quite trusting me. Like my deafness meant I couldn't handle client meetings or phone calls, never mind that email exists or video calls with captions or any number of accommodations that are completely standard now. I got tired of fighting to be taken seriously, so I went freelance. Now my work speaks for itself. Has it been hard, building your client base? Harder than I expected, easier than I feared. Lena smiled ruefully. The first year was rough. I had to take jobs I didn't want, charge less than I should have, prove myself over and over. But gradually, word got around. Now I'm selective about who I work with. If someone gives me a bad feeling in the initial consultation, if they seem uncomfortable with my deafness, or keep asking if I'm sure I can handle the project, I turn them down. Life's too short to work with people who don't respect you. That must take courage, Caleb signed, turning down paying work. It takes privilege, Lena corrected. I'm lucky enough to have built up enough of a client base that I can afford to be choosy. Not everyone in the deaf community has that luxury. A lot of us face employment discrimination that's subtle enough to be legal, but blatant enough to be devastating. Caleb nodded slowly, absorbing this. It was something he'd never had to think about. The daily calculations of dignity versus survival, the constant low-grade fight to be seen as capable. What can hearing people do to be better about that? Not in a performative way, just genuinely better. Lena looked surprised by the question, then thoughtful. Honestly, just assume competence. Don't assume someone can't do a job because they're deaf. Don't speak for us or about us when we're right there. Learn basic sign language, not to be a hero, just because it's a useful skill. And if someone tells you they need an accommodation, believe them. Don't make them prove their disability or justify their needs. That seems like a pretty low bar. And yet so many people fail to clear it. She picked up a deep-fried Oreo, examined it skeptically, then took a bite. Her expression cycled through surprise, pleasure, and mild horror. "Oh my God, this is disgusting. Why is it so good?" Caleb laughed. "That's the magic of deep frying. It makes everything better and worse simultaneously." They finished eating as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Caleb of Lena's jacket. The festival lights came on, strings of bulbs crisscrossing above the food trucks, and the crowd shifted from families with young children to couples and groups of friends. The band on the main stage switched from folk music to something with more energy, and people started dancing. "Do you want to walk?" Caleb signed. "We could check out some of the vendor booths, or we could just wander, whatever you prefer." "Let's wander," Lena signed back. "I'm too full to do anything purposeful." They walked through the festival, occasionally stopping when something caught their attention. A booth selling handmade pottery, an artist doing live caricatures, a woman making balloon animals for delighted children. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by Caleb's signing and the comfortable silences that happened when two people were simply enjoying each other's company. "Can I ask you something?" Lena signed as they paused near the edge of the festival grounds, where the noise faded and the view opened up to the Seattle skyline. "About Thursday night, when you confronted your coworkers, were you scared?" Caleb considered the question. "Not scared exactly, angry, definitely, but also—" He paused, searching for the right words. "In the Army, they teach you that there are moments when you have to act without hesitation, when overthinking will get you or someone else hurt. That was one of those moments. I saw what they'd done, I understood what it meant for you, and there wasn't any choice to make. Not really. But it could cost you the promotion." "It might," Caleb agreed. "Probably won't. I've got the video evidence, and what they did was pretty indefensible. But even if it does, I meant what I said Thursday. If defending you cost me the job, it wasn't the right job anyway." Lena was quiet for a moment, her gaze on the city lights. When she signed again, her movements were careful, measured. "I'm not used to people doing things like that. Taking risks for me. Most of the time, I'm the one making accommodations, adjusting my behavior, managing other people's comfort with my disability. Having someone just stand up for me without me asking or even expecting it. It's a lot to process." "Would you prefer I hadn't?" Caleb asked. "Because if I overstepped, if I should have let you handle it—" "No." Lena turned to face him fully. "No, you didn't overstep. It was exactly what I needed, even though I didn't know it until you did it. I just don't want you to think I expect you to be my defender all the time. I can fight my own battles. I've been doing it my whole life." "I know you can," Caleb signed, "but that doesn't mean you should have to fight alone." Something shifted in Lena's expression, the last of her wariness dissolving into something warmer, more open. "You're really serious about this, aren't you? About us, whatever this is becoming." "I am." Caleb took a step closer, close enough that if either of them reached out, they could touch. "I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But Sarah used to say that sometimes you just recognize people. That there are some connections that bypass all the logical reasons why they shouldn't work and just exist. And I recognize you, Lena. I don't know how or why, but I do." "I recognize you too," Lena signed, her hands trembling slightly. "And it terrifies me." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" "Both." She laughed shakily. "Good because this feels real and rare and worth exploring. Bad because I've been hurt before, and this feels like it could hurt so much worse if it doesn't work out." Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he rubbed his thumb across her knuckles gently. "I can't promise it won't hurt. Life doesn't come with those guarantees, but I can promise I won't hurt you on purpose. I can promise honesty and respect and showing up, even when it's hard. Is that enough?" Lena looked down at their joined hands, then back up at him. "Ask me again in a month." "Fair enough." Caleb smiled. "So we're doing this? Officially trying to see where this goes?" "We're doing this," Lena confirmed. Then, with a grin that was pure mischief, "Though I feel obligated to warn you that I'm a terrible girlfriend, I work weird hours, I'm stubborn as hell, and I have strong opinions about font choices that I will absolutely share without being asked.
I'm a single dad with a 7-year-old who thinks she's a volcanologist. I haven't been on a real date in 4 years. And I compulsively organize kitchen cabinets when I'm stressed, Caleb signed back. I think we'll manage. They stayed at the festival until it started shutting down, walking and talking until Lena's feet hurt in her boots, and Caleb's hands were tired from signing. When they finally headed toward the parking area, it felt too soon, like the evening had passed in minutes instead of hours. This was perfect, Lena signed as they reached her car. Exactly what I needed after the intensity of Thursday. Me too. Caleb paused, then asked, When can I see you again? You're eager, Lena teased. I spent 3 years not being eager about anything. I'm making up for lost time. Lena's expression softened. I have a crazy deadline this week, but what about next Sunday? There's this art gallery opening in Capitol Hill. My friend's doing a show. Would you want to come with me? I'd love to. Caleb hesitated, then added, And maybe sometime soon, if you're comfortable with it, you could meet Maisie? No pressure, and only if you want to, but she knows I went on a date and she's curious. The fact that Lena didn't immediately panic or make excuses felt significant. Instead, she just nodded. I'd like that. I'm not great with kids. I don't have any nibblings or friends with children, so I'm a bit out of practice, but I'd like to meet her. She'll love you, Caleb said with certainty. She loves anyone who treats her like an actual person instead of a cute accessory. Smart kid. She's my whole world, Caleb signed, his expression serious. So if this goes where I think it might go, you should know that up front, Maisie comes first, always. And I need to know that whoever I bring into our lives is going to respect that. I wouldn't want it any other way, Lena signed back. A man who puts his kid first? That's not a red flag, Caleb. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. They stood by her car for another moment, neither quite ready to end the evening. Finally, Lena reached up and squeezed Caleb's arm. Thank you for tonight, for the food coma and the conversation and just all of it. Thank you for giving me another chance. Caleb opened her car door, waiting while she got settled. Text me when you get home safe? You too. Caleb watched her drive away, then walked to his own car with a lightness in his chest he'd almost forgotten was possible. His phone buzzed before he'd even left the parking lot, a text from Emma demanding details. He smiled and typed back a brief response. It was perfect. Stop matchmaking. You're terrible at it. Her reply was instantaneous. If I'm so terrible, why are you texting me with that dopey grin I can sense through the phone? Who says I'm grinning? Please, I know you. Call me tomorrow. Caleb drove home through quiet Sunday streets, his mind replaying moments from the evening. The way Lena's eyes had lit up when she tried the Korean barbecue tacos. The serious conversation about accessibility and assumptions. The feel of her hand in his, cold fingers warming under his touch. The terrifying and wonderful admission that they were both invested in seeing where this connection might lead. When he got home, Mrs. Chen reported that Maisie had been an angel, homework done, teeth brushed, in bed by 9. After paying the babysitter and locking up, Caleb climbed the stairs to his daughter's room and eased open the door. Maisie was sound asleep, her volcano book open on her chest, her stuffed turtle clutched in one arm. He carefully removed the book, marked her place, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She stirred slightly, mumbling something about pyroclastic flow, and Caleb felt his heart squeeze with love so intense it was almost painful. I met someone, baby girl, he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him but needing to say it anyway. Someone I think you're going to really like. Someone who might become important to us, if we're lucky. Maisie slept on, oblivious, and Caleb kissed her forehead before retreating to his own room. He changed into sweats, brushed his teeth, and was climbing into bed when his phone lit up with a text from Lena. Home safe. Already planning my outfit for next Sunday. Already planning how to not burn another pancake while thinking about you, Caleb typed back. You made pancakes while thinking about me? Yesterday morning, nearly set off the smoke alarm. I'm flattered and concerned in equal measure, Caleb grinned at his phone. Get some sleep. Big deadline week, remember? You too. Thanks again for tonight. Anytime. He set his phone on the nightstand and lay back against his pillows, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd have to face whatever Monday brought. The conversation with his coworkers, the potential awkwardness, the question of whether Tom Reynolds knew what had happened. But tonight, he let himself simply feel hopeful. 4 days ago, 3 people had tried to sabotage him. 3 days ago, he'd walked into what was supposed to be a trap. And somehow, impossibly, it had led him here. To late-night texts with someone who made him laugh, to the prospect of introducing someone new to his daughter, to the terrifying and exhilarating possibility of building something real. Life, Caleb thought as sleep began to claim him, had a strange way of taking your worst moments and turning them into something beautiful. You just had to be brave enough to see the transformation happening. Brave enough to stand up for what mattered. Brave enough to let someone past your defenses, even when every instinct screamed at you to stay protected. He'd been brave once in the Army, jumping out of helicopters and leading his unit through hostile territory. He'd been brave again when Sarah got sick, holding her hand through chemo and radiation, staying strong for Maisie even when he wanted to fall apart. And now he was choosing to be brave in a different way, opening his heart to possibility, to risk, to the chance that love might find him twice in one lifetime. As Caleb drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was of Lena's smile, the way her whole face transformed when she laughed, the possibility of many more Sunday evenings spent eating questionable food truck combinations and talking until the lights went down. Monday morning arrived with rain, the proper Seattle kind that seemed to seep into everything. Caleb dressed carefully for work, choosing his confidence like armor, pressed shirt, his favorite tie, the watch Sarah had given him for their 5th anniversary. If there was going to be a confrontation, he'd meet it looking like someone who had nothing to apologize for. The office was tense from the moment he walked in. Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek were already at their desks, and all 3 looked up when he entered, their expressions ranging from guilty to defiant to deeply uncomfortable. Caleb nodded at them neutrally and continued to his own workspace, determined not to engage unless they initiated it. He made it through his first cup of coffee and halfway through his email backlog before Tom Reynolds appeared at his desk. "Hart, my office. Now please." The walk to Tom's office felt longer than usual. Through the glass walls, Caleb could see Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek watching, and he wondered if they'd already spoken to their manager, if they'd tried to spin the situation before he could defend himself. But when he stepped into Tom's office, the older man's expression was more weary than angry. "Close the door," Tom said, and Caleb obeyed. "Sit down." Caleb sat, keeping his posture relaxed, his hands visible. Military training again. Show no fear, admit no weakness. Wait for the other person to reveal their hand first. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "I received an interesting email this morning from Marcus Chen, Jennifer Walsh, and Derek Simmons. They're reporting themselves for what they're calling inappropriate conduct related to a personal matter involving a colleague. They've requested meetings with HR, and they've asked that I watch a video they've attached as context." "I see," Caleb said carefully. "I watched the video." Tom's eyes were sharp. "It's footage from a restaurant. Looks like Thursday evening. You're on a date with someone. And based on the email, I gather that date was arranged by your 3 colleagues as some kind of, what, test? Trap?" "That's my understanding, yes." Caleb kept his voice level. "I didn't realize it was a setup until midway through the evening when I noticed them filming from a corner booth. When I confronted them, they admitted they'd arranged the date hoping I would behave inappropriately so they could use the footage against me in the context of the promotion decision." "And did you? Behave inappropriately?" "No, sir. I behaved like a decent human being who was genuinely interested in getting to know the person I was having dinner with." Tom leaned back in his chair. "The woman you were with, she's deaf. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And they thought—" Tom shook his head in disgust. "They thought you'd what? Be uncomfortable? Say something offensive? They weaponized someone's disability for office politics?" "That appears to be the case. Hart, I've been in management for 23 years, and I've seen some underhanded bullshit in that time. But this?" Tom gestured at his computer screen where the email presumably still sat. "This is a new low, using someone outside our company, someone vulnerable to discrimination, as bait in their scheme to undermine you. It's reprehensible." "I agree," Caleb said quietly. "The question now is what to do about it." Tom steepled his fingers, regarding Caleb thoughtfully. "They've reported themselves, which shows some awareness that they crossed a line."
But that doesn't erase what they did, and it doesn't address the fundamental issue, which is that they don't trust the promotion process to be fair, and they felt entitled to sabotage it. What do you want from me? Caleb asked. Your perspective. Your recommendation.
Tom leaned forward. You're the one they tried to hurt. You and this woman, Lena, according to the video. What do you think should happen to them? Caleb had been thinking about this since Thursday night, running through scenarios in his mind during the quiet moments between texts with Lena and conversations with Maisie. Part of him wanted them punished, fired, blacklisted, made to understand the full consequences of their cruelty. But another part, the part that had spent the weekend feeling hopeful and happy, wondered if revenge was worth the energy. I think they need to understand why what they did was wrong, he said finally. Not just that it violated company policy or that it could have legal ramifications, but why it was fundamentally cruel. They used another human being as a pawn. They invited her to what she thought was a genuine date and turned it into a trap. That's the part that bothers me most. Not what they tried to do to me, but what they did to her. And in terms of consequences, Caleb thought about Lena's words from Sunday, about fighting her own battles but not having to fight alone. I want them to apologize to her directly, not a generic corporate sorry, but a real acknowledgement of harm. I want them to go through sensitivity training that's actually meaningful, not just checking a box. And I want them to understand that if they ever try something like this again, they're done. Tom nodded slowly. That's more generous than I expected. It's not generosity, Caleb corrected. It's practicality. We still have to work together, and I'd rather work with people who've learned from their mistakes than people who've been punished but haven't changed. You know the promotion is yours, Tom said, watching Caleb's reaction carefully. It was yours before this happened, and it's certainly yours now. Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek are good at what they do, but you're better. You're more reliable, more innovative, and frankly, you're the only one I'd trust to lead the next phase of the project. This stunt they pulled just confirmed what I already knew. They're not ready for the responsibility. Relief and vindication warred in Caleb's chest. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. You earned it. Tom stood, extending his hand. I'll handle Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek. You focus on your transition into the new role. And Hart? For what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to deal with this. Nobody should have to prove their character by being secretly filmed. Caleb shook his boss's hand, then left the office. He could feel eyes on him as he walked back to his desk, could sense the speculation rippling through the open office plan. By lunch, everyone would know something had happened. By the end of the day, the rumors would be wild and probably mostly wrong. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, he had work to do and a text to send. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Promotion is official. Also, my coworkers want to apologize to you directly. You don't have to accept if you don't want to, but I wanted you to know." Lena's response came quickly. "Congratulations, and I'll think about the apology thing. Depends on whether it's genuine or just CYA corporate nonsense." Knowing them, probably a mix of both, but I think they're genuinely shaken by what they did. Good. They should be. I'll let you know. Caleb pocketed his phone and turned to his computer, pulling up the project files he'd need for his new role. The work was familiar, comfortable, and for the next few hours he lost himself in spreadsheets and timelines, in the orderly world of tasks and deliverables where outcomes were predictable and controllable. It wasn't until late afternoon, when he was gathering his things to leave, that Marcus approached his desk. The younger man looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles under his eyes, his usual confident posture replaced by something hunched and uncomfortable. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked quietly. "Just for a minute?" Caleb gestured to the empty chair beside his desk. "Sure." Marcus sat, then seemed unsure how to begin. Finally, he said, "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because Tom told me to, not because I'm trying to save my job, but because what we did was unforgivable. We used someone, Lena, like she was an object instead of a person. And we tried to hurt you because we were jealous and petty and—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "There's no good excuse. It was just wrong." "It was," Caleb agreed. "But I appreciate you saying it. Jennifer and Derek feel the same way. We're all pretty horrified by what seemed like a good idea at the time." Marcus met Caleb's eyes. The promotion should be yours. It always should have been. You're better at this than we are. And instead of accepting that and learning from you, we tried to tear you down. That says a lot about us and nothing good." Caleb studied the other man, looking for signs of insincerity, but all he saw was genuine remorse. "What happens now?" "Now we do whatever it takes to make this right," Marcus said. "We apologize to Lena. Tom's coordinating that through you. We go through the training HR is setting up, and we try to be better colleagues and better people." He stood, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, I hope things work out with her. Lena, from what I saw before you spotted us, you two seemed really good together." After Marcus left, Caleb sat for a moment, processing the conversation. It would take time to rebuild trust, if that was even possible. But he appreciated the attempt, the acknowledgement of wrongdoing without deflection or excuse. That was more than a lot of people managed. His phone buzzed.
Lena again. "Made progress on the Nightmare project. Want to celebrate with me this week?" "Nothing fancy, just dinner at my place. I make excellent pasta." "I'd love that," Caleb typed back. "Name the day." "Wednesday?" "Perfect." As Caleb drove home that evening, rain streaking his windshield and NPR playing softly in the background, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not just hope, but certainty. Certainty that he'd handled the situation with his coworkers correctly. Certainty that the promotion was deserved, not given out of pity or politics. And certainty that Lena Brooks, with her sharp wit and guarded heart and absolute refusal to be anyone's victim, was exactly the kind of person worth taking a chance on. When he got home, Maisie was waiting at the door, bouncing with barely contained excitement. "Did you get it? Did you get the promotion?" "I got it," Caleb confirmed, scooping her up even though she was getting too big for it. "Your dad is officially a senior project manager." "Does that mean you get more money?" "It does." "Can we get a puppy?" Caleb laughed, setting her down. "Let's start with keeping our houseplants alive, okay? Then we'll talk about pets." They ordered pizza for dinner and watched a documentary about Mount St. Helens, Maisie's current favorite. Between discussions of volcanic ash and pyroclastic flows, Caleb found himself thinking about Wednesday, about seeing Lena's apartment for the first time, about the easy intimacy of a home-cooked meal versus the performance of restaurant dates. This was real, he thought. This thing happening between them was moving beyond the tentative first steps into something more substantial. And while that was terrifying, the possibility of heartbreak, of disrupting Maisie's life, of risking the careful stability he'd built over 3 years, it was also exhilarating. Because loving Sarah had been the best thing he'd ever done, even though losing her had nearly destroyed him. And if he'd learned anything from watching his wife face her mortality with grace and courage, it was that life was too short not to reach for connection when it appeared, too precious to waste on fear of what might go wrong. So Wednesday, he'd go to Lena's apartment. He'd eat her excellent pasta and probably fumble through conversation and definitely overthink everything. And maybe, if he was brave enough, he'd tell her that 3 days of texting and one perfect Sunday evening had convinced him that what his coworkers had meant as a trap was actually the best thing that had happened to him in years. Sometimes, Caleb thought as he tucked Maisie into bed that night, the universe gave you exactly what you needed in the strangest possible packaging. Sometimes cruel jokes became beautiful beginnings. And sometimes, when you were least expecting it, a blind date designed to humiliate you turned into the first chapter of something worth fighting for. Wednesday arrived with the kind of nervous energy that made Caleb check his reflection 3 times before leaving the house. He'd agonized over what to bring. Showing up empty-handed felt wrong, but he didn't want to presume too much either. He'd finally settled on a bottle of red wine that the clerk at the wine shop had promised would pair well with pasta, and a small bouquet of sunflowers because Lena had mentioned once, almost in passing, that they were her favorite. Maisie had watched his preparations with the clinical interest of a child who knew something significant was happening. "You're nervous," she'd observed while he was changing shirts for the second time. "A little," Caleb had admitted. "Because you really like her?" "Because I really like her." Maisie had considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Mom would want you to be happy, you know. She told me that before she died. She said you deserve to find someone who made you smile again." The memory had nearly undone him, standing there in his bedroom with his daughter looking up at him with Sarah's eyes and Sarah's wisdom. He'd knelt down and pulled Maisie into a hug, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. I love you, baby girl, more than anything in this world. I love you too, Dad. Now go have a good time and don't worry about me. Mrs. Chen promised we could make cookies. Now standing outside Lena's apartment building in Capitol Hill, Caleb took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer. The building was older, one of those classic Seattle walk-ups with character and probably questionable plumbing. Through the intercom, he heard Lena's voice. Come on up, 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The stairwell smelled like old wood and someone's cooking, garlic and something tomato-based that made his stomach rumble. When he reached the 3rd floor, Lena was already standing in her doorway, barefoot and smiling, wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater that looked impossibly comfortable. You brought flowers, she signed, her expression delighted, and you remembered sunflowers. I remember everything you tell me, Caleb signed back, handing her both the wine and the flowers. It's either romantic or creepy, depending on your perspective. Definitely romantic. Lena stepped back to let him in. Come in, please. Fair warning, my apartment is small and kind of a mess right now because I've been working nonstop on that deadline I mentioned. The apartment was indeed small. A studio, really, with the living space flowing into a tiny kitchen alcove, but it was so distinctly Lena that Caleb felt like he was getting a glimpse into her soul. The walls were covered with framed prints and artwork, an eclectic mix of vintage travel posters and modern graphic design that somehow worked together. Her desk took up one entire corner, dominated by 2 large monitors and scattered with sketches and notes. Books were piled on every available surface, design manuals, novels, art books, everything organized in a system that probably made sense to her but looked chaotic to anyone else. I love it, Caleb said, meaning it. It's very you. Cluttered and slightly overwhelming, Lena signed with a grin, setting the flowers in water. Creative and unpretentious. Caleb watched her move through the kitchen with easy familiarity, pulling out a vase, opening the wine. How did the deadline go? You said you made progress. Finished it yesterday at 2 a.m, sent it to the client, and spent today sleeping off the creative hangover. She poured wine into 2 glasses, handed him one. But it's done, and the client loved it, so I'm calling it a win. They settled on her couch, a deep, comfortable thing that looked like it had come from a thrift store and had been loved into submission. Caleb was hyper-aware of the intimacy of the setting, the way the lamplight made Lena's apartment feel like a warm cave against the rainy Seattle evening outside. This was different from public dates, from restaurants and festivals where other people provided a buffer. This was just the 2 of them, no distractions, nowhere to hide. So tell me about this art show on Sunday, Caleb signed, settling into the cushions. Your friend's work, what kind of art does she do? She's a photographer, specializes in portraits of people in the deaf community. Not the inspiration porn kind, just honest documentation of life. It's really powerful work. Lena tucked her feet under her, cradling her wine glass. I've been trying to convince her to do a book for years, but she's convinced nobody would buy it. I'd buy it, Caleb said. People are always interested in perspectives they don't normally see. It's why travel writing exists, right? We want to understand experiences different from our own. That's what I keep telling her, Lena smiled. You'll have to tell her that on Sunday. Maybe she'll believe it coming from someone outside the deaf community. They talked about art, about Caleb's complete lack of artistic ability despite his best efforts in a college drawing class, about Maisie's current phase of insisting on drawing volcanoes on everything, including her homework assignments. The conversation flowed easily between signing and speaking, Lena reading his lips when his hands were occupied with his wine glass, Caleb watching her hands shape words with a grace that seemed almost like dancing. When the timer went off in the kitchen, Lena jumped up. Okay, pasta's ready. I hope you're hungry because I always make too much. She hadn't been kidding about the excellent pasta. It was a simple dish, spaghetti with a sauce that tasted like summer tomatoes and fresh basil, but executed perfectly. They ate at her small table by the window, rain streaking the glass and the city lights blurred into impressionist smears of color. This is incredible, Caleb signed after his 3rd bite. Where did you learn to cook like this? My grandmother, she was Italian, came over when she was 18, and she believed that food was love made tangible. Lena's expression went soft with memory. She was the first person in my family who really understood my deafness.
Everyone else wanted to fix it, to make me more like them. But Nona just adapted. She learned to face me when she talked, to use her hands when words weren't enough. She made me feel like I belonged exactly as I was. She sounds amazing. She was. I lost her 5 years ago, and I still miss her every day. Lena twirled pasta around her fork. But I have her recipes, and every time I make one, it's like she's here with me. Does that sound strange? Not at all. Caleb thought about Sarah, about the ways she still existed in their lives through Maisie's laugh, and the photos on the walls and the recipes he still made that had been her favorites. The people we love don't really leave us. They just change forms. Exactly. Lena met his eyes across the table. You get it. A lot of people don't. They think grief has an expiration date, that you should move on and let go. But loving someone doesn't stop just because they're gone. No, Caleb agreed quietly. It doesn't. They finished eating, and Lena refused his offers to help clean up, shooing him back to the couch while she dealt with the dishes. Caleb used the time to study her apartment more closely, the details that revealed her personality. A bulletin board covered in ticket stubs and photos, Lena with friends, Lena at what looked like design conferences, Lena hiking somewhere beautiful and green, a shelf dedicated entirely to vintage cameras, lined up like soldiers, a framed sketch that looked like a child's drawing, signed, Love, Sophie, in careful letters. My niece, Lena explained, catching him looking as she returned with fresh wine. My sister's daughter. She's 8 and determined to be an artist when she grows up. Does she sign? She's learning. My sister's family took lessons when I first lost my hearing. I was 16, meningitis. And Sophie's been practicing since she was old enough to move her hands. Lena sat down beside him, closer than before. She's actually better at it than her parents now. Kids pick up language so much faster. Wait, Caleb turned to face her fully. You weren't born deaf? No, I had normal hearing until junior year of high school. Then I got really sick, spent a week in the hospital, and when I woke up, she gestured to her ears. Gone. Completely. The doctors said it was rare but not unheard of. The infection damaged my auditory nerves beyond repair. Caleb tried to imagine it, being 16, a time when everything already felt overwhelming and unstable, and suddenly losing one of your senses. That must have been devastating. It was. Lena's hands moved slowly, carefully, like she was picking her way through painful memories. I was furious for about a year. Furious at my body for failing me. Furious at my friends for not knowing how to talk to me anymore. Furious at the universe for singling me out. I went from being this popular, outgoing kid to being isolated and scared and so angry I could barely function. What changed? I met other deaf people. My parents, bless them, they tried so hard. They found a support group, basically forced me to go. And there were all these people who'd been deaf their whole lives, who'd built full, rich lives despite, or maybe because of, their deafness. They didn't see it as a tragedy. They saw it as a different way of experiencing the world. Lena smiled, but there was sadness in it. It took me a long time to get there, to stop mourning what I'd lost and start appreciating what I had. But eventually, I did. And once I stopped fighting against my deafness and started accepting it, everything got easier. Do you ever miss it? Sound? Sometimes. Music, especially. I used to play piano, and I still dream about it sometimes, not just the visual of playing, but the actual sound of the notes. She paused, considering. But mostly, I don't think about it anymore. This is just my normal now. I can't miss something I barely remember. Caleb reached out and took her hand, the gesture feeling natural now, essential. Thank you for telling me that, for trusting me with it. Thank you for asking. Lena squeezed his fingers. Most people don't. They either assume I was born deaf or they're too uncomfortable to bring it up. But you just asked, straightforward, no awkwardness. I appreciate that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked, the rain providing a visual rhythm against the window. Then Lena shifted closer, close enough that Caleb could feel the warmth of her body, could smell her perfume mixed with the lingering scent of garlic and basil from dinner. Can I ask you something? She signed with her free hand. About Sarah. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Ask.
Caleb signed back. Are you ready for this? Really ready? Her expression was serious, searching. Because I like you, Caleb. I like you a lot. But I've been the rebound before. The transitional person someone dates while they're still processing their grief. And I can't do that again. I can't be the person you practice on before you find the person you actually want. The honesty in the question deserved an equally honest answer. Caleb thought about Sarah, about the 3 years since her death, about the slow process of learning to be himself without her. I don't know if anyone is ever completely ready to love again after losing someone. Part of me will always be grieving Sarah, will always wish she was here to see Maisie grow up, will always carry that loss. He paused, making sure Lena was watching his hands. But I'm not looking for a replacement. I'm not trying to recreate what I had. I'm looking for something new, something different, something that's ours. And I hope, that's what this could be. What about Maisie? How will she handle you dating someone? Better than I probably would if I were in her position, Caleb admitted. She's been encouraging me to make friends for over a year now. She knows I'm lonely, and she worries about what will happen to me when she grows up and doesn't need me anymore. She sounds wise beyond her years. She had to grow up fast when Sarah got sick. I tried to protect her from it, but you can't really hide cancer from a 4-year-old who's watching her mother waste away. His throat tightened with the memory. She was so brave. Braver than me, honestly. And she remembers enough of her mother to know that Sarah would want us to be happy, to let new people into our lives. Lena was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. Then she signed, I want to meet her. Maisie. Not yet. It's too soon. But eventually. If this keeps going the way I think it might be going. I'd like that, Caleb said. She'd like you. You're smart and creative, and you don't talk down to people. Those are Maisie's top 3 criteria for acceptable humans. What are your top 3 criteria? Caleb pretended to think about it. Honesty, kindness, and the ability to cook excellent pasta. Lucky for you, I hit all 3, Lena signed with a grin. Then more seriously, what happens now, Caleb? We keep dating, getting to know each other, and then what? Where do you see this going? I don't know, he admitted. I'm not good at casual. I never have been. When I commit to something, a job, a person, a relationship, I'm all in. But I also know that we barely know each other, that it's way too soon to be making long-term plans. So I guess what happens now is we take it one day at a time. We keep showing up for each other. We stay honest, and we see where it leads. One day at a time, Lena repeated. I can do that. She leaned in slowly, giving him time to read her intention, to pull back if he wanted to. But Caleb didn't want to pull back. He wanted this. Wanted her. With a clarity that surprised him. When her lips met his, soft and tentative and tasting like wine and tomato sauce, something in his chest that had been locked tight for 3 years finally loosened. The kiss was brief, almost chaste, but it felt monumental. When they separated, Lena's eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed. Was that okay? She signed. I should have asked first, but it was perfect, Caleb interrupted, then kissed her again, because now that he'd started, stopping seemed impossible. This kiss was deeper, more confident, and when it ended, they were both breathless. Wow, Lena signed, her hands shaky. That was... wow. Agreed, Caleb managed. Wow is an accurate assessment. They spent the rest of the evening on the couch, talking and kissing and talking some more, the conversation flowing between topics like water finding its path. Lena told him about disastrous clients and design triumphs. Caleb shared Maisie's stories that made her laugh so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. They discovered shared interests. Both loved hiking but were terrible at it. Both had complicated relationships with their siblings. Both believed that breakfast foods were acceptable at any time of day. It was after 11 when Caleb finally checked his phone and realized how late it had gotten. I should go, he signed reluctantly. Mrs. Chen's probably wondering if I abandoned Maisie entirely. When can I see you again? Lena asked, walking him to the door. Sunday? The art show? And maybe before that? I'm going to be climbing the walls by Sunday if I don't see you before then. Caleb felt warmth spread through his chest. Friday? I could make you dinner at my place. Nothing as good as your pasta, but I make a decent stir-fry.
And you could meet Maisie if you're ready. Lena's expression cycled through surprise, nervousness, and then determination. Okay, yes, let's do it. I'm terrified, but let's do it. She's going to love you, Caleb promised. How can you be so sure? Because I'm falling for you, and Maisie and I have excellent taste in people. The words hung in the air between them, weightier than Caleb had intended. He hadn't meant to be so honest, so vulnerable, but apparently his mouth had decided to bypass his brain entirely. Lena stared at him, her eyes wide, and for a terrible moment he thought he'd gone too far, said too much too soon. Then she signed, I'm falling for you too. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm falling. Caleb kissed her again, pouring everything he couldn't quite articulate into the gesture, relief and joy and hope and the bone-deep certainty that whatever this was becoming, it was worth the risk. When they finally separated, both of them were smiling like idiots. Friday? Lena confirmed. Text me your address. And Caleb? Don't worry so much, it's going to be fine. The drive home felt surreal, like Caleb was floating instead of driving. He kept touching his lips, remembering the feel of Lena's mouth on his, the way she'd smiled against his kiss. When he finally pulled into his driveway, he sat in the car for a moment, trying to compose himself before facing Mrs. Chen. Inside, the babysitter reported that Maisie had been perfect as always, had made cookies that were currently cooling on the counter, and had gone to bed without complaint. After paying her and seeing her out, Caleb went upstairs to check on his daughter. She was sprawled across her bed, her volcano book open beside her, looking peaceful and young in a way that made his heart ache. He thought about Friday, about introducing Lena to the most important person in his life, and felt a flutter of nerves. This wasn't just about him anymore. Whatever happened with Lena would affect Maisie too. And while his daughter had been encouraging him to date, the reality of actually bringing someone new into their lives might be harder than either of them anticipated. But as Caleb pulled Maisie's blanket up and kissed her forehead, he felt more certain than scared. Lena got it, got the importance of Maisie, got that his daughter came first, got that this wasn't just about the two of them. And that understanding, that respect for the life he'd built with his daughter, was exactly what he needed. The next day at work, Tom Reynolds called a department meeting to officially announce Caleb's promotion. The room was tense, everyone aware of the drama that had preceded this moment, even if they didn't know all the details. Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek sat together near the back, their expressions carefully neutral. When Tom finished his announcement and asked if anyone had questions, the silence was deafening. After the meeting, Caleb was surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations, asking questions about the new role, generally treating him like he'd accomplished something remarkable. He accepted the praise graciously, but his mind was elsewhere. On Lana, on Friday night, on the way his life seemed to be shifting into something new and unfamiliar. Marcus approached him near the end of the day, looking uncomfortable. Lena agreed to meet with us, he said without preamble. Tomorrow, after work. She said she'd listen to our apology, but she's not promising to accept it. That's fair, Caleb said. Will you be there when we apologize? Do you want me to be? Marcus considered this. Honestly, yes. I think it'll help. Having you there as a mediator, a witness, someone who gives a damn about whether we actually mean it. Then I'll be there, Caleb agreed. The next evening, Caleb met Lena at a coffee shop downtown. She'd dressed professionally, slacks and a blazer, and her expression was carefully controlled. Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek arrived together, all three looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. They sat at a table in the corner, away from the other customers. Caleb positioned himself slightly back from the group, present but not central. This was between his coworkers and Lena. He was just there for support. Marcus went first, his hands shaking slightly as he faced Lena. Ms. Brooks, I want to apologize for what we did. We invited you to what you thought was a genuine date, but it was actually a setup designed to make Caleb look bad. We used you, your deafness specifically, as a tool in our office politics. That was cruel and inexcusable. Jennifer continued, her voice thick with emotion. I've been thinking a lot about what we did, trying to understand how we could have thought it was okay. And I realize now that we treated you like an object instead of a person. We didn't consider how humiliating it would be for you to discover the truth.
how hurtful our assumptions about disability were. I'm so sorry. Derek was last, and his apology was the simplest, but somehow felt the most genuine. What we did was wrong. I knew it was wrong even before we did it, and I went along with it anyway. That makes me complicit. I'm sorry we hurt you, and I'm sorry we treated your disability like a weapon we could use against someone else. You deserved better. Lena listened to each apology, her face unreadable. When they finished, she sat back in her chair and regarded them for a long moment. Then she signed, and Caleb translated aloud. Here's what I want you to understand. I came to that restaurant excited and nervous and hopeful. I'd been on enough bad dates to be cautious, but I let myself believe that maybe this time would be different. And for a while, it was different. Caleb was amazing, and I felt seen and valued in a way I rarely do. She paused, making sure they were all paying attention. Then I found out it was a trap. That you'd chosen me specifically because you thought my deafness would make Caleb uncomfortable. Do you have any idea how dehumanizing that is? To know that you looked at me and saw only a disability you could exploit? To realize that you never once considered me as a real person with real feelings who would be hurt by your scheme? The three of them looked stricken, and Caleb saw genuine remorse in their expressions. Marcus spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. We didn't think about it like that. We should have, but we didn't. We were so focused on our goal, undermining Caleb, that we completely failed to consider you as anything other than a means to an end. That's the problem, Lena signed. People with disabilities are constantly being used as props in other people's stories. We're inspiration porn, or we're obstacles to overcome, or we're diversity checkboxes. We're rarely just seen as people living our lives. She leaned forward. Your apologies sound genuine, and I appreciate that. But what I need from you is more than sorry. I need you to understand why what you did was wrong at a fundamental level. I need you to commit to never using someone's disability, anyone's difference, as a weapon again. We won't, Jennifer said firmly. I promise you, we won't. Lena studied her, then nodded slowly. Okay. I accept your apology, with the understanding that apologies are meaningless without changed behavior. Do better. Be better. And maybe someday I'll be able to think about what happened without getting angry. They talked for a few more minutes, the conversation gradually becoming less tense. Marcus asked Lena about her work, genuine curiosity in his voice. Jennifer mentioned a deaf cousin she'd lost touch with, wondering if she should make an effort to reconnect. Derek was quieter, but Caleb could see him processing, really listening in a way he probably hadn't before. When they finally left, Lena let out a long breath. That was harder than I expected. You were amazing, Caleb signed. The way you articulated everything made them really understand. That was powerful. I've had a lot of practice explaining disability politics to people who've never had to think about it before. She managed a tired smile. Do you think they meant it? The apologies? I do. I think they're genuinely horrified by what they did now that they've really confronted it. Good. Lena glanced at her watch. I should get home. Big day tomorrow. I have a client meeting that's probably going to be a disaster, and I need to prepare for maximum diplomacy. Still on for tomorrow night? Caleb asked, unable to keep the nervousness out of his voice. Meeting Maisie? Still on, Lena confirmed. Though I reserve the right to be completely awkward and terrible with children. You're going to be great, Caleb promised. Just be yourself, that's all Maisie needs. But as Caleb drove home, he felt the familiar flutter of anxiety. He'd told Maisie about Lena, had explained that they were dating, had prepared her as much as he could, but there was no way to predict how his daughter would actually react to meeting the woman who might become a significant part of their lives. Maisie had been the center of his world for so long. What if she felt threatened? What if she resented Lena for taking up space that used to belong entirely to her? At home, he found Maisie at the kitchen table, drawing yet another volcano. She looked up when he entered, her expression curious. How did your meeting go? It went well. Everyone apologized to Lena for what they did. Did she forgive them? She accepted their apology, which isn't quite the same thing as forgiving them, but it's a start. Maisie nodded wisely. Mom used to say that forgiveness is for yourself, not for the person who hurt you, that holding on to anger just makes you sick. Your mom was very smart, Caleb said, sitting down beside his daughter.
Speaking of which, we need to talk about tomorrow. Lena's coming over for dinner, remember?
I remember, Maisie set down her crayon. Are you nervous? A little, Caleb admitted. I really want you two to like each other. Dad, I'm going to like her. You like her, which means she's probably cool. Plus she knows sign language, which is basically the coolest thing ever.
Maisie tilted her head.
Are you worried I'll be mean to her?
No, baby. I know you'll be polite. I'm just worried that, I don't know, that things will be weird, that it'll be uncomfortable for everyone. It might be weird at first, Maisie said pragmatically, but weird isn't bad. It's just different. And different can be good, right? Caleb pulled his daughter into a hug, overwhelmed by her maturity and kindness. When did you get so wise?
I've always been wise, Maisie said matter-of-factly. You just weren't paying attention.
Friday evening arrived with agonizing slowness. Caleb spent the afternoon cleaning the house, cooking the stir-fry, and generally wearing a path in the kitchen floor with his pacing. Maisie watched his anxiety with amusement, occasionally offering helpful suggestions like, maybe stop freaking out, and it's just dinner, Dad, not a presidential summit. When the doorbell finally rang at 6:30, Caleb nearly jumped out of his skin. Maisie beat him to the door, yanking it open to reveal Lena standing on the porch, holding a container of what looked like homemade cookies and looking as nervous as Caleb felt. Hi, Lena said, her voice slightly too loud, the way people who were nervous sometimes spoke. You must be Maisie. I'm Lena. Maisie studied Lena for a long moment, taking in everything with the intense scrutiny only children possess. Then, carefully, she lifted her hands and signed, Hello, welcome to our house. Lena's face lit up with genuine delight. You sign.
A little, Maisie signed back, her movements clumsy but earnest. Dad's been teaching me again. I used to know more, but I forgot. Well, you're doing great, Lena signed. And these cookies are for you and your dad. I made them this morning, chocolate chip, because everyone likes chocolate chip, right? Right, Maisie agreed, taking the container. Then, in a move that surprised both adults, she stepped forward and hugged Lena quickly before retreating back into the house. Dad's been nervous all day. He cleaned the bathroom twice. Maisie, Caleb groaned, but Lena was laughing. It's okay, she signed. I've been nervous too. I changed outfits 4 times. Dinner was easier than Caleb had dared hope. Maisie appointed herself as the official tour guide, showing Lena around their house with running commentary about everything from the marks on the wall that tracked her height to the photo gallery in the hallway. She pointed out pictures of Sarah matter-of-factly, explaining who her mother had been without sadness or awkwardness. That's Mom when she was pregnant with me, Maisie said, pointing to a photo of Sarah with her hand on her swollen belly. And that's her at my 4th birthday party. She was sick then, but she still made me a cake shaped like a volcano. Lena studied each photo carefully, and Caleb watched her face for signs of discomfort, but all he saw was genuine interest and respect. She was beautiful, Lena signed, and you look just like her. I have Dad's nose, though, Maisie said. Mom used to say I got the best parts of both of them. They ate at the kitchen table, Maisie keeping up a steady stream of conversation about school and her friends and her volcano obsession. Lena asked questions that showed she was actually listening, not just being polite. When Maisie mentioned wanting to visit Mount Rainier, Lena pulled out her phone and showed her photos from a trip she'd taken last summer. You went to the top? Maisie's eyes were huge. Not quite to the top. That requires special equipment and training, but I hiked up to Camp Muir, which is pretty high. The view was incredible. Can we go, Dad? Maisie turned to Caleb. Please? Maybe next summer, Caleb hedged. That's a pretty serious hike, baby girl. I'll train, Maisie promised. I'll practice every day. After dinner, while Caleb cleaned up, Maisie showed Lena her volcano collection. Books, models, posters, everything a 7-year-old could accumulate about her special interest. Lena asked questions, offered observations, treated Maisie's enthusiasm with the seriousness it deserved. And watching them together, watching his daughter light up, while explaining pyroclastic flows to someone who actually cared, Caleb felt something in his chest expand with hope, so intense it was almost painful. This could work, he thought. This could actually work. Later, after Maisie had reluctantly gone to bed, only agreeing after Lena promised to come back soon. Caleb and Lena sat on the couch in the living room. The house was quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. "So," Caleb signed. "Verdict?" "She's incredible," Lena signed back. "Smart, funny, kind. You've raised an amazing kid, Caleb." "She likes you too. I could tell." "How could you tell?" "Because she showed you her volcano stuff. She doesn't share that with just anyone. It's her special thing. The fact that she brought it out means she trusts you." Lena smiled, but there was something complicated in her expression. "This is real now, isn't it? Not just you and me dating, but potentially becoming part of each other's lives, part of Maisie's life." "Yes," Caleb said simply. "Is that okay?" "It's terrifying," Lena admitted. "I've never dated someone with kids before. I've never had to think about how my relationship choices might affect a child. That's a lot of responsibility." "I know, and if it's too much, if you need to step back—" "I don't want to step back," Lena interrupted. "I'm scared, but I don't want to walk away. Because what we have, this connection, this possibility, it's worth being scared for." Caleb pulled her close, and she came willingly, tucking herself against his side like she'd been designed to fit there. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just being together in the quiet house where he'd rebuilt his life after Sarah's death. And somehow, impossibly, it didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like growth, like choosing to live fully instead of just surviving. "Stay," he signed against her hair. "Not tonight. Maisie's not ready for that. But soon. Stay and be part of this messy, complicated, beautiful life I'm trying to build." "Okay," Lena signed back. "Okay, I'll stay." The art gallery opening on Sunday was everything Lena had promised, and more. The space was intimate, just a converted warehouse in Georgetown with exposed brick and industrial lighting that made the photographs on the walls seem to glow from within. Caleb stood beside Lena, watching her friend Rachel accept congratulations from the steady stream of visitors, and felt like he was seeing into a world he'd never quite understood before. The photographs were stunning, not because they were technically perfect, though they were, but because of what they captured. A deaf couple signing to each other across a breakfast table, their hands moving in the morning light with a grace that spoke of decades of conversation. A young boy in a classroom, his face intent as he watched his teacher's hands shape words. An elderly woman laughing, her hands frozen mid-sign, joy radiating from every line of her face. "This one," Caleb said quietly, stopping in front of a photograph of a teenager standing in front of a mirror, practicing signs. The girl's expression was frustrated, determined, and achingly vulnerable all at once. "This feels important." Lena stepped closer, reading the small placard beside the frame. "That's Maya. She lost her hearing at 14 in a car accident." Rachel photographed her learning sign language for the first time, trying to find a way to communicate again after everything changed. She paused, her own hands moving unconsciously to mirror the position in the photograph. That could have been me, was me, in a way, trying to find myself again after meningitis took my hearing. "You were braver than you give yourself credit for," Caleb signed. "Losing something that fundamental and not just surviving but thriving, that takes courage most people never have to find." "Or stubbornness," Lena signed back with a small smile. "Sometimes I think the only thing that got me through was being too stubborn to let my deafness win." They moved through the gallery slowly, Lena occasionally translating context that wasn't visible in the images themselves. A photograph of hands signing "I love you" belonged to Rachel's parents, deaf for 3 generations back, who'd built their entire lives around visual language and community. A portrait of a middle-aged man staring directly at the camera with fierce pride was Samuel, a deaf lawyer who'd fought discrimination cases and won, who'd spent his career proving that disability was never inability. Rachel found them near the end of the exhibit, pulling Lena into a tight hug before turning to Caleb with a curious expression. She signed something quick and complex that made Lena laugh and shake her head. "Rachel wants to know if you're the one," Lena signed, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Apparently I've been talking about you a lot." "I hope so," Caleb signed back to Rachel, though we're still figuring out what "the one" means. Rachel grinned and signed something else. Lena translated, She says you have kind eyes and good hands. High praise from a photographer. They stayed at the gallery for another hour, Caleb meeting more of Lena's friends from the deaf community, each introduction feeling like being welcomed into something larger than himself. These were people who'd built lives and relationships and careers in a world that often tried to limit them, who'd found ways to thrive despite constant barriers. And they were accepting him, the hearing boyfriend, the outsider, with a warmth that surprised and humbled him. Afterward, they walked through Georgetown in the early November evening, the air crisp enough that Lena pulled her jacket tighter and Caleb wished he'd brought gloves. They found a quiet bar, settled into a corner booth, and ordered drinks they nursed while talking about the photographs, about Rachel's talent, about the way art could reveal truths that words sometimes couldn't capture. "Thank you for coming tonight," Lena signed. "I know it's not your world being surrounded by deaf people, probably feeling a little out of place." "I didn't feel out of place," Caleb signed back honestly. "I felt welcomed. Your friends were incredibly kind, and the work was beautiful. Plus, I got to see you in your element, which was worth the price of admission all by itself." "My element?" "Confident, comfortable, surrounded by people who get you completely." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "You're different with them than you are with me sometimes. More relaxed, maybe. Like you don't have to constantly be translating yourself." Lena looked down at their joined hands, her expression thoughtful. "That's perceptive. I do relax more around other deaf people because there's no communication gap to navigate. But with you, it's different too. You make the effort to meet me where I am, to learn sign language, to understand rather than just accommodate. That's rare. It shouldn't be rare. It should be basic human decency." "Should be and are two different things," Lena signed, "but I appreciate that you think it should be standard. That's part of why I'm falling for you. You genuinely don't see my deafness as something to overcome or work around. You just accept it as part of who I am." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and comfortable. Caleb's promotion meant longer hours and more responsibility, but he made time for Lena, dinners at each other's apartments, weekend activities that included Maisie, quiet evenings on the couch watching movies with captions on. They were building something, brick by careful brick, and every shared moment felt like mortar strengthening the foundation. Maisie took to Lena with an enthusiasm that secretly terrified Caleb. His daughter, who'd been cautious about new people since Sarah's death, opened up completely. She taught Lena her favorite card games, showed her every single drawing in her volcano portfolio, demanded that Lena help her practice her signing, even when her small hands fumbled the shapes. And Lena met her enthusiasm with patience and genuine interest, never talking down to Maisie, never treating her like a child who needed managing. One Saturday in late November, they took Maisie to the Pacific Science Center. The dinosaur exhibit was the main attraction, but it was the earthquake simulator that captured Maisie's attention. She dragged both adults through it 3 times, explaining with scientific accuracy far beyond her 7 years how tectonic plates worked and why earthquakes often preceded volcanic eruptions. "She's going to be a volcanologist," Lena signed to Caleb while Maisie was examining a display about Mount Vesuvius. "You know that, right? This isn't a phase, this is her calling." "I know," Caleb signed back. "Sarah knew it too. She used to joke that we'd created a tiny scientist who would probably end up living on the side of a volcano somewhere, and we'd spend our retirement worrying about pyroclastic flows." Sarah sounds like she had a good sense of humor. "She did. She would have liked you, I think. You have the same kind of directness, the same refusal to sugarcoat things." He paused, watching Maisie gesture excitedly at the Vesuvius display. "Is it weird? Me talking about her?" "No," Lena signed. "She was a huge part of your life. She's Maisie's mother. Pretending she didn't exist would be weird. This is just honest." Later, over pizza in the museum cafe, Maisie asked the question Caleb had been dreading. "Lena, are you Dad's girlfriend?" Lena glanced at Caleb, who nodded slightly, permission to answer honestly. "I am," she signed and spoke simultaneously. "Is that okay with you?" Maisie considered this, chewing her pizza thoughtfully. "Are you going to get married?" "Maisie," Caleb started, but Lena squeezed his hand under the table. "I don't know," Lena told Maisie directly. "Your dad and I are still figuring out what we mean to each other.
But I can tell you that I care about him a lot, and I care about you too. And whatever happens, I promise I'll never try to replace your mom." "You couldn't," Maisie said matter-of-factly. "Nobody can replace Mom. But that's okay. You're not supposed to be Mom. You're supposed to be you." The simple wisdom in that statement made both adults pause. Then Maisie grinned and added, "Plus, you know about volcanoes now, which makes you basically the coolest girlfriend ever." On the drive home, with Maisie asleep in the back seat, Caleb reached over and took Lena's hand. "You handled that perfectly," he signed one-handed, keeping his eyes on the road. "I was terrified I'd say the wrong thing." "You said exactly the right thing. Thank you for being honest with her. She needs that more than she needs platitudes." "She's an amazing kid, Caleb. You've done such a good job with her." "We're doing a good job," he corrected. "You're part of this now, whether you plan to be or not." Lena was quiet for a moment, watching the Seattle streets blur past. Then she signed, "I want to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for a while but wasn't sure when to bring up." "I'm listening." "I love you." Her hands moved with careful deliberation, each sign precise. "I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months. But I love you. I love your dedication to Maisie. I love the way you stand up for what's right even when it costs you. I love that you learned sign language years ago just so a little girl could play with her friend. I love all of it, all of you. And I needed you to know." Caleb pulled into his driveway and put the car in park before turning to face her fully. "I love you too," he signed. "I've been trying to figure out when to tell you, worried it was too soon or too much. But I love you, Lena. I love your strength and your honesty and the way you never ask me to be anything other than exactly who I am." They kissed across the center console, awkward and perfect, until Maisie stirred in the back seat and mumbled something about being home. Caleb carried his half-asleep daughter into the house while Lana gathered up the souvenir bags from the museum, and together they got Maisie ready for bed. It felt domestic and right, the three of them moving around each other with increasing familiarity, like they were learning the choreography of being a family. After Maisie was asleep, Lena stayed. They made tea and sat on the couch, Lena's head on Caleb's shoulder, his arm around her waist. The television played something neither of them watched, captions scrolling past unread, while they simply existed together in the quiet house. "I should go home," Lena signed eventually, though she made no move to actually leave. "I have a client call early tomorrow." "Or you could stay," Caleb signed back. "I have an extra toothbrush. And Maisie already adores you. I don't think she'd be shocked to see you at breakfast." "Are you sure? That's a big step." "I'm sure." Caleb kissed her temple. "I'm sure about you, about us, about building whatever this is becoming. So yes, stay. Please." Lena stayed. She borrowed one of Caleb's t-shirts to sleep in, brushed her teeth with the promised extra toothbrush, and climbed into his bed like she'd been doing it for years instead of for the first time. They lay facing each other in the darkness, hands finding each other under the covers, and Caleb felt a peace he hadn't experienced since before Sarah got sick. "This is good," he signed, knowing she could see him in the ambient light from the street. "This is really good." "It is," Lena agreed. "Scary, but good." "Why scary?" "Because I could get used to this. Waking up with you, being part of your and Maisie's lives, having a place to belong. And if it doesn't work out, if something goes wrong, losing this will hurt so much worse than anything I've lost before." "Then we won't let it go wrong," Caleb signed. "We'll work at it, communicate honestly, choose each other every day. That's all any relationship is, choosing to stay and do the work." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's worth it." Thanksgiving arrived with Caleb's sister Emma inviting herself and her family over for dinner, declaring that she wanted to meet this mysterious Lena who'd captured her brother's heart. Caleb tried to warn Lena about Emma's enthusiastic personality and tendency to ask inappropriate questions, but Lena just laughed and said she could handle one intensely curious sister. Emma arrived with her husband Mark and their 2 kids, twins, 5 years old, who immediately attached themselves to Maisie like barnacles. Within minutes, the house was chaos, children shrieking, adults trying to coordinate cooking times, Emma interrogating Lena with a cheerfulness that was only slightly terrifying. "So you're deaf," Emma said,
making sure Lena could see her face. That's how you met Caleb, right? Some horrible setup by his coworkers? Emma, Caleb warned, but Lena waved him off. It's okay. Yes, his coworkers tried to use my deafness to sabotage him. It didn't work out the way they planned. Lena smiled at Caleb across the kitchen. Turns out your brother is pretty hard to sabotage. That's because he's annoyingly perfect, Emma said. Always has been. Even when we were kids, he was the responsible one, the one who did everything right. It's exhausting having him as a brother. I'm standing right here, Caleb signed. I know. I'm building you up to your girlfriend. You're welcome. The dinner was chaotic and warm and exactly what Caleb needed. Emma told embarrassing childhood stories that made Lena laugh until she cried. Mark offered to teach Maisie some basic magic tricks, much to her delight. The twins alternated between performing elaborate plays with the dinner rolls and demanding that Lena teach them sign language, which she did with admirable patience. After dinner, while the kids played in the living room and Mark was loading the dishwasher, Emma pulled Caleb aside on the back porch. The November air was cold, their breath visible in small clouds, but Emma seemed immune to the temperature. I like her, Emma said without preamble. Lena, she's good for you. I'm glad you approve. I'm serious, Cal. You've been going through the motions since Sarah died, and I get it. Losing her was devastating. But with Lena, you're actually living again. You're smiling, you're present, you're letting yourself be happy. It's good to see. Caleb leaned against the porch railing, watching through the window as Lena helped Maisie show the twins how to sign turkey. I didn't realize how much I'd shut down until I started opening back up. It's like I've been holding my breath for 3 years and suddenly I can breathe again. Does Maisie know? How serious you are about Lena? She knows I love Lena. We've been honest with her about what's happening. And she's okay with it? More than okay. She told me last week that she's glad I found someone who makes me laugh again.
Caleb's voice caught slightly. She said Sarah would be happy for us. Emma put her arm around her brother's waist, leaning her head on his shoulder. Sarah would be happy. She loved you too much to want you to be alone forever. And Lena seems like someone Sarah would have liked. Strong, honest, doesn't take any crap from anyone. That's what I thought too. They stood together in the cold, watching through the window as their families blended together, as Lena signed patiently with 5-year-old twins who couldn't quite get their fingers to cooperate, as Maisie looked up at Lena with open adoration. This was what moving forward looked like, Caleb thought. Not forgetting what you'd lost, but making room for what you might gain. Christmas approached with the manic energy that always accompanied the holidays when children were involved. Maisie wrote her letter to Santa. First item requested was a real volcano, but Dad says that's probably dangerous, so maybe just more volcano books, and insisted on decorating every surface of the house with handmade ornaments. Caleb and Lena took her to pick out a Christmas tree, the 3 of them arguing good-naturedly about height and fullness, while the tree lot attendant watched with amusement. This one, Maisie declared, pointing at a tree that was definitely too tall for their living room. That one won't fit through the door, baby, Caleb signed. But it's perfect. How about this one? Lena suggested, indicating a tree that was shorter but impressively full. It's like the volcano of Christmas trees, not the tallest, but definitely the most dramatic. Maisie considered this logic, then nodded. Okay, the volcano tree it is. They brought it home and spent the evening decorating, Caleb lifting Maisie so she could reach the higher branches, Lena untangling lights with the patience of a saint. They ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor surrounded by ornament boxes. And when they finally finished, the tree was a chaotic, beautiful mess of mismatched decorations and too much tinsel. It's perfect, Maisie declared, and Caleb had to agree. That night, after Maisie was in bed, Caleb and Lena curled up on the couch, the Christmas tree lights providing the only illumination. They'd fallen into this routine, Lena staying over several nights a week, both of them pretending it wasn't significant, even though it clearly was. I've been thinking, Lena signed, her movements catching the colored lights from the tree, about next steps, about what we're building here. Caleb's heart rate picked up. What about it? My lease is up in February. I could renew, or... She paused, and Caleb could see her gathering courage. Or I could not renew. I could move in here with you and Maisie.
If you wanted that. If you think it's time. The offer hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and risk. Moving in together was huge, especially with Maisie to consider. It would mean fully blending their lives, committing to something more permanent than occasional sleepovers and weekend activities. I want that, Caleb signed, his movements perhaps too emphatic. I want you here, not just visiting, but living here, being part of our daily routine, but only if you're sure, only if it's what you want too, not just what you think I want. I'm sure, Lena signed. I've never been more sure of anything. This thing we're building, you, me, Maisie, it's what I want. It's what I've been looking for without knowing I was looking for it. They kissed in the glow of the Christmas tree lights, and Caleb felt the last of his reservations dissolve. This was right. This was good. This was choosing to live fully instead of merely surviving. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas blurred together in a haze of happiness. Caleb threw himself into his new role at work, leading projects with a confidence that surprised even him. His coworkers, including Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek, treated him with genuine respect now, the awkwardness of their failed sabotage gradually fading into uncomfortable memory. Tom Reynolds pulled him aside before the holiday break to tell him that the executive team was impressed with his leadership and discussing even bigger opportunities for the new year. But work, despite its demands, felt secondary to what was happening at home. Lena was there most evenings, helping Maisie with homework, cooking dinner with Caleb, curling up on the couch to watch nature documentaries about volcanoes that bored both adults but fascinated Maisie. They were practicing being a family, learning each other's rhythms and habits, building something that felt increasingly solid. On Christmas Eve, Emma and her family came over again, along with Caleb's parents who'd driven up from Portland. His mother, Margaret, had been cautiously supportive when Caleb first told her about Lena, her worry about him moving on too quickly from Sarah evident even through the phone line. But in person, watching Lena interact with Maisie, seeing how naturally she fit into their family dynamic, Margaret's reserve melted. "She's lovely," Margaret signed to Caleb when Lena was in the kitchen helping Emma with dessert. "Different from Sarah, but lovely in her own way." "She is," Caleb agreed, "and Maisie clearly adores her." Maisie thinks Lena hung the moon. Last week she asked if Lena could officially be her bonus mom, which made Lena cry. Margaret smiled, touching her son's cheek with maternal affection. "You deserve this, sweetheart. You deserve to be happy again. Sarah would want this for you." Christmas Day was magical in the way that only Christmas with a 7-year-old could be. Maisie woke up at 5:30 and immediately tried to wake up both adults, bouncing on the bed until they agreed to get up. She tore through her presents with gleeful abandon, exclaiming over books about volcanic eruptions and a complex model kit that would definitely require adult supervision to build. Lena had gotten Maisie a custom sweatshirt with "Future Volcanologist" printed across the front, and the delight on Maisie's face when she opened it made both adults tear up. "I'm never taking this off," Maisie declared. "I'm wearing it every day forever." "You'll have to wash it sometimes," Caleb pointed out. "Then I'll wear it every day except laundry day." Later, after Maisie had finally exhausted herself and was napping on the couch, Caleb gave Lena her present. He'd agonized over what to get her, wanting something meaningful without being presumptuous. He'd finally settled on a vintage camera he'd found at an antique store, along with a photograph he'd had Emma take of him and Maisie. Lena unwrapped the camera carefully, her expression shifting from curiosity to wonder as she realized what it was. "Caleb, this is beautiful. This is too much." "It's not too much," he signed. "You collect cameras, and this one made me think of you. Plus, I thought you might want to start documenting things. Us. Our life together." She opened the envelope containing the photograph and went completely still. In the image, Caleb and Maisie were laughing at something off camera, their heads close together, the late afternoon light making them glow. The composition was perfect, intimate without being staged, capturing a moment of genuine joy. "This is what I see when I look at you two," Lena signed, her hands trembling. "This love, this connection. This is what I want to be part of." "You are part of it," Caleb assured her. "You have been for months now. Your family, Lena. Your home." She kissed him then, ignoring the fact that Maisie might wake up at any moment, pouring everything she felt into the gesture. When they separated, both of them were smiling through tears.
I have something for you too, Lena signed. She retrieved a wrapped box from her bag, handing it to Caleb with a nervousness he rarely saw in her. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with simple lettering. For Maisie, Love, Dad, and Lena. Caleb opened it to find the first page already filled with Lena's handwriting. Dear Maisie, this journal is for your dad to fill with memories of your growing up, but I wanted to write this first entry to tell you something important. I love your father. I love you. And I promise to always be honest with you, to support your dreams, even the scary volcano ones, and to honor your mother's memory. You're an incredible kid, and I'm honored to be part of your life. Love, Lena. Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't sign, could only pull Lena close and hold her while emotion overwhelmed him. This woman, who'd started as a stranger in a trap meant to hurt him, had become essential. She'd taken his broken family and helped make it whole again, not by replacing what was lost, but by adding something new and beautiful. Thank you, he finally managed to sign against her shoulder. For all of it, for staying, for choosing us, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for seeing me, Lena signed back. For really seeing me, not just my deafness, but everything. I've spent my whole life feeling like I had to prove I was capable, that my disability didn't diminish me. But with you, I've never had to prove anything. You just believed in me from the start. New Year's Eve found them back at Marcello's, the restaurant where it had all begun. Caleb had made the reservation weeks ago, wanting to reclaim the space that had been tainted by his coworker's scheme, wanting to create new memories in the place where he'd first met Lena. The manager had remembered them, had given them the same table by the window, and there was something poetic about the full circle of it all. I can't believe it's been 3 months, Lena signed, looking around the restaurant. 3 months since 3 people tried to ruin your life and accidentally gave you me instead. Best worst thing that ever happened to me, Caleb agreed. He reached across the table, taking both her hands. I have something to ask you, and I need you to really hear me, okay? Lena's expression shifted to concern. Okay? Move in with us. Not in February when your lease is up. Move in now, tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're ready, because I wake up on the days you're not there and the house feels empty. Maisie asks every morning if it's a Lena day. We want you there all the time, not just sometimes. Caleb, I know it's fast, he continued. I know conventional wisdom says we should take it slow, that there are steps and timelines we're supposed to follow. But nothing about us has been conventional from the start. And I don't want to waste time on arbitrary waiting periods when I already know what I want. I want you in my house and in my life and in my future, permanently and completely. Lena was crying now, tears streaming down her face while she smiled. Yes, she signed. Yes, I'll move in. Not tonight. I have stuff at my apartment and clients to notify and practical things to handle. But soon, as soon as I can manage it. They ordered champagne to celebrate, the same server from their first date bringing it with a knowing smile. When midnight approached, the restaurant dimmed the lights and turned on the television so everyone could watch the ball drop in Times Square. Caleb pulled Lena close as the countdown began, and when the moment arrived, they kissed while the restaurant erupted in cheers around them. Happy New Year, Caleb signed when they finally separated. Happy New Beginning, Lena signed back. The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the magnitude of the decision they'd made. Moving in together was huge, especially with a child involved. There would be adjustments, challenges, moments of frustration as they learned to share space and make decisions together. But underneath the nervousness was certainty, the bone-deep knowledge that this was right. At home, Mrs. Chen reported that Maisie had stayed up until almost midnight despite promises to go to bed early, determined to see the new year arrive. She was asleep now, sprawled across her bed with her new volcano model clutched in one hand. After the babysitter left, Caleb and Lena stood in Maisie's doorway, watching her sleep. She's going to be so excited, Lena signed, when we tell her I'm moving in. She's already planning which drawer you'll get in the bathroom, Caleb signed back. She's been not so subtly reorganizing to make room for your things. She's a good kid. She's the best kid. Caleb pulled Lena close. And you're going to be an amazing bonus mom, or whatever title Maisie decides she wants to use for you. They went to bed in Caleb's room, soon to be their room, and lay in the darkness talking about logistics and timelines and all the practical details of combining their lives. But underneath the practical discussion was something deeper, more profound. They were choosing each other, fully and intentionally, despite all the ways it could go wrong. They were betting on love and connection and the possibility that two broken people could help make each other whole. "I'm scared," Lena admitted in the quiet darkness, her signs barely visible. "What if I'm not good enough at this? At being part of a family, at helping raise a child, at all of it?" "Then we'll figure it out together," Caleb signed. "Nobody's good at it from the start. We'll make mistakes and apologize and learn and keep trying. That's what family is. People who stick around even when it's hard, who choose each other again and again." "I can do that," Lena signed. "I can choose you and Maisie again and again. That's easy. That's the easy part." Outside, Seattle celebrated the new year with distant fireworks and car horns and the general chaos of people determined to mark the passage of time with noise and light. But inside Caleb's house, in the quiet darkness of his bedroom, two people held each other and dreamed about the future they were building together. A future that had started with cruelty, but had transformed into grace. A future where a deaf woman and a widowed single father and his volcano-obsessed daughter would become a family, unconventional and beautiful and entirely their own. The trap his coworkers had set had failed spectacularly, but in its failure, it had given Caleb something precious beyond measure. It had given him Lena, with her strength and vulnerability and absolute refusal to be anyone's victim. It had given him the courage to love again, to open his heart to possibility, despite the certainty of risk. It had given Maisie a bonus mom who treated her intelligence and interests with respect, who was learning to sign so they could communicate in yet another language of love. As Caleb drifted towards sleep, Lena's breathing evening out beside him, he thought about the strange paths life took, how a moment of intended cruelty could become the catalyst for healing, how three people who'd wanted to hurt him had inadvertently led him to exactly where he needed to be, how loss and grief, while never erased, could be balanced by new love and new beginnings. Monday would bring the practical work of moving Lena's things, of reorganizing closets and combining households, of officially becoming something more permanent than two people who were dating. There would be challenges ahead, moments of adjustment and compromise, times when they'd have to work hard to remember why they'd chosen this. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Tonight, Caleb Hart had everything he'd thought he'd lost when Sarah died. A partner, a person to build a life with, someone to love who loved him back with equal ferocity. And tomorrow, when Maisie woke up and they told her Lena was moving in permanently, their family would take one more step toward completion. Not replacement, not forgetting, just adding something new and precious to what already existed, honoring the past while embracing the future. That was the real gift his coworkers' failed trap had given him. Not just Lena herself, but the understanding that loving again didn't diminish what he'd had before. It just proved that his heart was big enough for both. For all of them. For the family they were becoming, day by imperfect day, choice by intentional choice, love by hard-won love. The move happened gradually over the course of 2 weeks in January. Lena didn't want to disrupt Maisie's routine too drastically, so they brought her belongings over in careful stages. First her clothes and toiletries, then her work equipment, finally the accumulated possessions that made a place feel like home. Each box that arrived, each item that found its place in their house, felt like another stitch binding their lives together. Maisie appointed herself the official moving coordinator, creating elaborate charts about which closet should hold what, debating drawer organization with the seriousness of a military strategist. Lena's art stuff should go in the spare room, she declared one Saturday afternoon, standing in the middle of what had been Caleb's home office with her hands on her hips. "You can share the space, Dad. She needs good light for her work." "I can work in the living room," Caleb protested mildly. "No, you can't. You'll get distracted by the TV." Maisie turned to Lena. "He always says he won't, but he does. Mom used to make him work upstairs for that reason." The casual mention of Sarah no longer made everyone freeze uncomfortably. It had taken time, but they'd found a way to honor her memory while still moving forward, to acknowledge that she was part of their family history without letting grief dominate their present. Lena had made that possible with her complete lack of jealousy about Sarah,
her understanding that loving Caleb meant accepting all of him, including the parts that would always belong to his first wife. By the end of January, Lena's apartment was empty and her lease officially terminated. She'd handed over the keys that morning, and now she stood in what was fully, completely her home, watching Maisie and Caleb argue about the best way to arrange furniture in the living room. This is really happening, she signed to herself, though Caleb caught the movement and came over. Having second thoughts? He signed, his expression concerned. No, just overwhelmed in the best way. She gestured around the room. A year ago, I was alone and convinced I'd always be alone. Now I have this, you, Maisie, a family. It's almost too much to process. You're stuck with us now, Caleb signed with a grin. No takebacks. I wouldn't dream of it. February brought Valentine's Day, which Maisie insisted required extreme celebration, since Lena was now officially part of the family. She spent an entire week making elaborate cards at school, each one more glitter-covered than the last. On the actual day, she presented Lena with a construction paper heart that read, "To my bonus mom, you're lovely," with a drawing of a volcano erupting hearts. I helped with the spelling, Maisie explained unnecessarily. But the pun was all me. Lena clutched the card to her chest, tears streaming down her face while Maisie looked alarmed. Did I do something wrong? No, baby, Lena signed through her tears. You did something incredibly right. Thank you for this. That evening, after Maisie was in bed, Caleb surprised Lena with reservations at Marcello's, their restaurant, the place where everything had begun. The same corner booth was empty, waiting for them, but this time there were no hidden cameras, no scheme, no trap, just two people who loved each other, celebrating how far they'd come. I have something for you, Caleb said after they'd ordered, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. Lena's eyes went wide. Caleb? It's not what you think, he interrupted gently. I mean, it's jewelry, but it's not that jewelry. Not yet. He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with 3 charms, a small volcano, a sign language hand shape spelling the letter L, and a heart. The volcano is for Maisie, because she brought us together in a way. The L is for you, obviously, and the heart is for what we're building. Lena held out her wrist so he could fasten it, her hands shaking slightly. It's perfect. But what do you mean, not yet? I mean that I'm going to marry you someday, Caleb signed, his movement sure and confident. I don't know when exactly, because I want to make sure Maisie's ready and you're ready and the timing feels right. But I'm telling you now, clearly and directly, that this is forever for me. You're forever for me. I'm forever for you too, Lena signed back, her voice thick with emotion. Whenever you're ready to ask properly, the answer is yes. They ordered the same meals they'd had on their first date, laughing about the dramatic confrontation that had happened right where they were now sitting. The server, a different one this time, brought them dessert with a candle in it, having somehow intuited that they were celebrating something significant. To new beginnings, Caleb toasted when their champagne arrived. To finding family in unexpected places, Lena added. They clinked glasses and drank, and Caleb felt a contentment so complete it was almost frightening. This was what happiness looked like, not the absence of struggle or pain, but the presence of people worth struggling for, worth choosing despite the certainty that life would bring challenges. He'd learned that from Sarah, had watched her face cancer with grace because she'd believed their family was worth fighting for. And now he was applying those same lessons to his relationship with Lena, choosing her daily, working through difficulties instead of running from them. March arrived with the kind of rain that made Seattle infamous. Lena had been living with them for 2 months, and the adjustment period was mostly behind them. They'd figured out morning routines, had established boundaries around work time and family time, had weathered their first real argument, about dishes, inevitably, and had come out stronger for it. At work, Caleb's career was thriving. The promotion had opened doors he hadn't known existed, and Tom Reynolds had hinted at even bigger opportunities on the horizon. But more satisfying than professional success was the change in his relationships with Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek. The 3 of them had completed extensive sensitivity training, had volunteered with local disability rights organizations, and had genuinely worked to become better people. They weren't exactly friends with Caleb now,
but there was mutual respect and occasional collaboration that felt surprisingly natural. One afternoon, Jennifer stopped by Caleb's desk with a request that surprised him. "I'm organizing a fundraiser for the Washington State Association of the Deaf," she said. "And I was hoping you and Lena might be willing to speak about your experience. Not the whole setup thing, just about the importance of learning sign language, about accessibility in the workplace, that kind of thing." Caleb studied her carefully, looking for hidden motives, but all he saw was genuine commitment. "I'll ask Lena. But Jennifer, why are you doing this? The fundraiser, the volunteer work? Is it just penance?" "It started that way," Jennifer admitted. "I felt guilty about what we did, wanted to make amends somehow. But the more I learned about the deaf community, about the barriers people face every day, the more invested I became. This isn't about you anymore, Caleb. It's about doing something meaningful with my privilege and access." "Then yes, we'll speak at your fundraiser. Lena will probably have better things to say than me anyway." When Caleb told Lena about Jennifer's request that evening, she was quiet for a long moment. They were cooking dinner together, a routine they'd developed where Lena chopped vegetables while Caleb handled the actual cooking, and Maisie was at the table doing homework with one eye on her volcano documentary playing on the iPad. "Do you think she's sincere?" Lena finally signed. "Jennifer? Or is this just elaborate image rehabilitation?" "I think it's both," Caleb signed honestly. "I think she started from a place of guilt but has genuinely grown from the experience. People can change, given the right motivation." "They can," Lena agreed. "Okay, I'll do it. But I'm going to be honest about what happened. Not to shame them, but because I think there's power in acknowledging how discrimination happens, even among well-meaning people." The fundraiser happened in late March, held at a community center in Capitol Hill. The room was packed with people from the deaf community, allies, and professionals interested in accessibility issues. Jennifer had done an impressive job with the organization, and when she introduced Caleb and Lena, her face showed genuine respect rather than the performative allyship Lena had feared. Lena spoke first, her signs translated by a professional interpreter for the hearing attendees. She talked about her experience as someone who'd lost their hearing as a teenager, about the isolation and anger that had followed, about gradually finding community and acceptance. Then she shifted to their story, and Caleb watched the audience's reactions as she described the blind date setup. "3 people thought my deafness could be used as a weapon," Lena signed. "They believed that my disability would make someone uncomfortable enough to reveal prejudice they could exploit. And they were wrong on every level. Wrong about Caleb, wrong about disability being a weakness, wrong about the fundamental humanity of their scheme." She paused, making sure everyone was following. "But here's what I want you to understand. Those 3 people weren't monsters. They were ordinary people who'd internalized ableist assumptions so deeply they didn't even recognize what they were doing. And when confronted with the reality of their actions, they did something remarkable. They listened, they learned, and they changed. That's the power of education and accountability, working together." Caleb spoke next, talking about why he'd learned sign language initially, about Maisie and her friend Lily, about the importance of learning skills not because you need them now, but because someone you might meet in the future might need you to have them. He talked about how loving Lena had expanded his understanding of accessibility, had made him aware of barriers he'd never noticed before because they didn't affect him personally. "The deaf community shouldn't have to constantly educate hearing people," Caleb said, the interpreter signing his words. "But hearing people have a responsibility to educate ourselves, to seek out information, to make accommodations without being asked, and most importantly, to see deaf people as people first, with all the complexity and capability that implies." The applause when they finished was thunderous, hands waving in the air in the deaf community's visual applause. Afterward, people approached to share their own stories, to thank them for their honesty, to ask questions about their relationship. Jennifer stood off to the side, watching with an expression that Caleb recognized as pride mixed with lingering guilt. "You did good work organizing this," Caleb told her as they were packing up. "This matters. What you're doing matters." "It doesn't erase what I did," Jennifer said quietly. "But maybe it balances the scales a little." "Maybe it does." April brought Maisie's 8th birthday, and with it the request Caleb had been both expecting and dreading. I want to go to Mount Rainier, Maisie announced over breakfast one Saturday. For my birthday, the three of us. A real hiking trip. Caleb exchanged glances with Lena. They'd talked about this, had known it was coming, but hearing it stated so directly still made his stomach clench with parental worry. That's a big hike for an 8-year-old baby. Maybe we should start with something smaller. I've been training, Maisie said with dignity. Lena and I have been going on practice hikes. We went to Discovery Park last weekend and I didn't even get tired. You went hiking without me? Caleb signed to Lena, trying to keep his tone light. She asked me to take her, Lena signed back, and I thought it was good for us to do things together, just the two of us, building our relationship. Maisie was watching this exchange with interest. Her signing had improved dramatically in the months since Lena moved in, to the point where she could follow basic conversations. You're not mad, are you, Dad? Not mad, Caleb assured her. Just surprised. And maybe a little hurt that you didn't invite me on your practice hikes. You were working, Maisie said pragmatically. And you hate hiking anyway. You just do it because you think you're supposed to. The accuracy of that statement made Lena laugh so hard she had to sit down. Caleb tried to maintain his dignity but failed, joining in the laughter. Okay, fine, you got me. I'm terrible at hiking, and I mostly do it out of parental obligation. But if you want to go to Rainier for your birthday, we'll go, the three of us. They spent the next 2 weeks preparing, buying proper hiking boots for Maisie, studying trail maps, checking weather forecasts obsessively. Caleb might not love hiking, but he was competent at planning for it, and he wasn't about to take his daughter into the mountains unprepared. The morning of Maisie's birthday arrived clear and beautiful, the kind of spring day that made Seattle residents remember why they endured 9 months of rain. They drove to Mount Rainier, Maisie bouncing in the back seat and providing running commentary about everything she knew about the mountain. Did you know Rainier is a stratovolcano? That means it's made of layers of hardened lava and ash. And it last erupted in 1894, which is a really long time ago, but volcanologists think it could erupt again someday. Comforting, Caleb muttered to Lena, who grinned. They chose the Skyline Trail, challenging but doable for a fit 8-year-old with 2 adults to help. The hike was beautiful. Wildflowers just beginning to bloom, snow still visible on the upper slopes, the mountain itself dominating the view with impossible grandeur. Maisie led the way, her new hiking boots scuffing against the trail, her volcano sweatshirt from Lena already stained with dirt. Halfway up, they stopped for lunch at a viewpoint that overlooked the valley below. Maisie sat between the 2 adults, eating her sandwich and talking about pyroclastic flows with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every documentary ever made about volcanoes. This is the best birthday ever, she declared. Better than when we went to Disneyland with Mom. No offense to Mom, that was really fun too, but this is more my speed. No offense taken on behalf of your mother, Caleb signed with a smile. She'd be so proud of you, you know. 8 years old and hiking up Mount Rainier like it's nothing. She'd be proud of you too, Maisie said seriously. For being happy again. For finding Lena. The casual way she said it, like it was simply fact rather than something profound, made both adults pause. Then Lena reached over and squeezed Maisie's hand. Thank you, kiddo. That means a lot. They made it to their destination, a viewpoint where the mountain seemed close enough to touch. And Maisie stood there for a long time, just staring at the volcano she'd been obsessed with for years. Caleb took photos with his phone, capturing Maisie's expression of pure joy, Lena signing something to his daughter, the 3 of them together with the mountain behind them. On the hike down, Maisie asked the question that had clearly been building all day. Lena, are you going to marry my dad? Lena nearly tripped over a rock, catching herself at the last second. That's a pretty direct question, Maisie. I know, but I want to know, because if you are, I think you should do it soon, like this summer. We could have the wedding here at Rainier with the volcano in the background. It would be perfect. Caleb's heart was pounding. They'd talked about marriage, had agreed it was in their future, but they hadn't discussed timing or Maisie's readiness. Now here was his daughter, not just accepting the idea but actively advocating for it. Would that be okay with you? Lena signed carefully. If your dad and I got married? It would be more than okay, Maisie said firmly. It would be great. You make him happy, and you're nice to me, and you know about volcanoes now. What else is there?" "What else is there indeed?" Caleb murmured, catching Lena's eye. They shared a look that communicated volumes, surprise, joy, and the recognition that if their 8-year-old was ready, maybe they were too. That night, after Maisie had gone to bed exhausted from her birthday hike, Caleb and Lena sat on the back porch in the spring darkness. The air smelled like rain coming, and somewhere down the street, someone was playing music too loudly. "So," Caleb signed, "Maisie thinks we should get married this summer, at Mount Rainier, with the volcano in the background." "She's not subtle, your daughter," Lena signed back, but she was smiling. "She's been spending too much time with Emma, learning to meddle in other people's love lives." Caleb reached for Lena's hand, threading their fingers together. "But she's not wrong. We've been talking about marriage like it's this distant future thing, but why? Why wait when we both know what we want?" "Because marriage is serious," Lena signed. "Because we've only been together 7 months. Because there are a million practical considerations we haven't discussed. And because you're scared," Caleb added gently, "which is fair. I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of wasting time on arbitrary waiting periods than I am of committing to you." Lena was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark backyard. Then she signed, "Ask me." "What?" "Ask me. Properly. Right now. If you mean it, if you're really ready, ask me to marry you." Caleb's heart rate picked up. This wasn't how he'd planned it. He'd imagined something more elaborate, more romantic, maybe with a ring and definitely with better lighting. But Lena was watching him with an intensity that demanded honesty over performance, and he realized this was exactly right. This was who they were: direct, honest, uninterested in pretense. He slid off his chair and knelt on the porch, taking both her hands in his. "Lena Brooks, you walked into that restaurant 7 months ago thinking you were going to have a terrible blind date. Instead, you got me, anxious, grieving, carrying more baggage than anyone should have to deal with. And you stayed anyway. You chose me, chose Maisie, chose this complicated, messy life we're building together. You've made our house a home. You've made my daughter feel seen and valued. You've made me remember what it feels like to be truly happy. Will you marry me?" Lena was crying now, tears streaming down her face while she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she signed. "Yes, absolutely yes. I'll marry you." They kissed on the porch, both of them laughing and crying simultaneously, and Caleb felt something inside him finally, fully relax. This was it. This was his second chance at love, at partnership, at building a life with someone who saw him completely and chose him anyway. From inside the house came a whoop of excitement, and they turned to see Maisie hanging out of her bedroom window, grinning like a maniac. "I knew it. I told you summer at Rainier would be perfect." "You're supposed to be asleep," Caleb called up to her. "I'm too excited to sleep. We're getting married." "We're getting married," Maisie corrected. "All 3 of us. We're becoming an official family." And that, Caleb thought, was exactly right. Not him marrying Lena and bringing her into his existing family, but the 3 of them choosing to become something new together. The next morning, they told Emma, who screamed so loudly that her twins started crying, and Mark had to take the phone away. Caleb's parents drove up from Portland that weekend to celebrate, and Maisie immediately drafted them into wedding planning, producing elaborate sketches of volcano-themed decorations that made Margaret laugh until she cried. The planning consumed May and June. They kept it simple, just immediate family and close friends, a ceremony at Paradise on Mount Rainier with the mountain as their backdrop, a small reception afterward at a lodge nearby. Maisie served as their wedding coordinator, taking her role seriously enough that she created spreadsheets and timelines that rivaled anything Caleb had produced for work projects. The week before the wedding, Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek approached Caleb at work with an unusual request. "We'd like to make a donation to your wedding," Marcus said, "to a charity of your choice, in you and Lena's names, as a way of marking the occasion and acknowledging how our actions brought you two together." Caleb studied them for a moment. They'd come a long way from the people who'd set up that cruel trap, had genuinely worked to become better. "Talk to Lena," he said finally. "This should be her choice as much as mine." Lena chose the Washington State Association of the Deaf, the organization Jennifer had been volunteering with. The donation was generous enough to fund a scholarship for deaf students pursuing higher education, and Jennifer worked with the organization to name it the Hart Brooks Future Leaders Scholarship. "It's weird," Lena told Caleb the night before their wedding, "that something good came from something meant to be cruel. The people who tried to hurt us ended up contributing to something meaningful." "That's the thing about redemption," Caleb said. "It's always possible if people are willing to do the work." They were willing. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, clear, warm, the mountain visible in all its glory. Caleb stood at the ceremony site watching guests arrive, his heart pounding with nerves and excitement in equal measure. Emma fussed with his tie while Maisie supervised, already dressed in her flower girl outfit and taking her responsibilities very seriously. "You ready?" Emma asked her brother. "I've been ready since the moment I met her," Caleb said. The ceremony began with Maisie walking down the aisle, scattering flower petals with scientific precision, making sure each petal was evenly distributed. Then came Lena, walking alone because she'd insisted she didn't need to be given away. She was choosing this herself. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that moved in the mountain breeze, and she'd woven small flowers into her hair. She was beautiful in a way that made Caleb's chest ache. The officiant was a friend of Lena's from the deaf community, and she signed and spoke simultaneously throughout the ceremony. When it came time for vows, Caleb had memorized his in sign language, wanting Lena to receive them in her first language. "Lena, 7 months ago, I walked into a restaurant thinking I was doing someone a favor by going on a blind date I didn't want. Instead, I found you. I found someone who saw past my grief to the person I was trying to become, someone who loved my daughter without hesitation or condition, someone who challenged me to be better, braver, more honest. I promise to honor your voice, to create space for your needs, to be your partner in every sense of the word. I promise to keep learning, keep growing, keep choosing you every single day. I promise to love you not despite our differences, but because of them, because they make us stronger together than we could ever be apart." Lena was crying openly now, and when it was her turn, her hands shook as she signed her vows. "Caleb, you saw me when so many others looked right through me. You treated my deafness as a fact rather than a problem to solve. You stood up for me when you barely knew me. You chose me when you could have walked away. You made space for me in your life and your heart. I promise to be the partner you deserve, to love Maisie as fiercely as I love you, to build this family with intention and care. I promise to be honest even when it's hard, to communicate even when I'm scared, to show up for you the way you've shown up for me. You've given me a home I never thought I'd have, and I promise to honor that gift every day of our lives." When the officiant pronounced them married, the applause was both heard and silent, hands clapping and hands waving in the visual applause of the deaf community. Caleb kissed his wife, and felt complete in a way he hadn't since Sarah died. Not because Lena replaced what he'd lost, but because she'd helped him understand that his heart was big enough for both. For all the love he'd experienced and all the love still to come. The reception was joyful and chaotic, exactly what a wedding should be. Maisie gave a toast that was mostly about volcanoes, but ended with a heartfelt declaration that she was glad her dad had found someone who made him smile again. Emma told embarrassing stories about Caleb's childhood. Rachel showed a slideshow of photos she'd taken of Caleb and Lena over the past months, images that captured their journey from tentative first dates to confident partnership. Marcus, Jennifer, and Derek came to congratulate them, and there was a moment of awkwardness before Jennifer signed, carefully, clearly having practiced. "Thank you for letting us be part of this. I'm so glad our mistake led to your happiness." "So are we," Lena signed back. "So are we." As the evening wore on and the sun began to set behind Mount Rainier, Caleb found himself standing with Lena at the edge of the lodge's deck, looking out at the mountain that had witnessed their promises. Maisie was playing with Emma's twins, her laughter carrying on the evening air, and everything felt exactly as it should be. "We did it," Lena signed. "We actually did it." "Having second thoughts?" Caleb teased. "Not even a little." She leaned against him, fitting perfectly under his arm. "I was just thinking about that first date. How terrified I was that it would be another disappointment.
How certain I was that you'd find some excuse to leave the moment you realized I was deaf. And instead, I fell in love with you. Instead, you fell in love with me, Lena agreed, and confronted your coworkers and introduced me to your daughter and convinced me that happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. They stood there as darkness fell and stars began to appear, as their wedding guests gradually said goodbye, as Maisie finally admitted she was tired and Emma took her to bed in one of the lodge rooms. They stood there as the mountain disappeared into darkness, as the air grew cold, as the reality of their new life together settled into something solid and real. What happens now? Lena signed eventually. Now we go home, Caleb signed back. All three of us. We go home and we live our lives and we keep choosing each other day after ordinary day. We fight sometimes and make up. We celebrate Maisie's successes and support her through failures. We build careers and make friends and probably argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes. We do all the boring, beautiful, mundane things that make up a life. That sounds perfect. It really does. 1 year later, they returned to Marcello's on their anniversary. Tom had given Caleb the evening off, and Emma had agreed to watch Maisie overnight so they could have uninterrupted time together. They sat at the same table where it had all begun, and the manager, who remembered them, sent over a complimentary dessert with congratulations on their marriage. A year ago tonight, Caleb signed, 3 people tried to ruin my life. And instead gave you the best thing that ever happened to you, Lena finished with a grin. Second best, Caleb corrected. Maisie is still first. Obviously, I wouldn't want it any other way. They ordered the same meals they'd had on that first date, laughing about how far they'd come. Lena's design business was thriving, and she'd started taking on deaf interns, mentoring young designers the way she wished someone had mentored her. Caleb had been promoted again, now leading an entire division, and he made sure his team included people with diverse backgrounds and abilities. But the biggest change was at home. Maisie was thriving with 2 parents who loved her, her confidence growing as she navigated 3rd grade with the certainty of a child who knew she was supported. She'd started taking formal sign language classes, declaring that she wanted to be fluent so she could communicate properly with mom and dad, her name for Caleb and Lena collectively, refusing to differentiate between them. After dinner, they walked through downtown Seattle hand in hand, and Caleb felt the same contentment he'd experienced at their wedding. This was his life now, partnership and communication, and choosing each other deliberately, day after day. It wasn't always easy. They'd had fights about money and household responsibilities and how much time Lena spent working. They'd navigated Maisie's difficult questions about death and loss. They'd stumbled through the early stages of blending their lives, making mistakes and apologizing and learning together. But they'd also had moments of perfect joy. Lazy Sunday mornings in bed while Maisie made them breakfast. Game nights that devolved into laughter. The day Maisie had signed her first complete conversation without any errors. The moment Lena had come home with news that she'd been featured in a major design magazine. All the small victories and quiet joys that made up a shared life. I have something to tell you, Lena signed as they reached their car. I've been waiting for tonight because it felt right to say it here, where it all started. Caleb's heart rate picked up. Should I be worried? No, excited maybe. Terrified definitely, but in a good way. She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. The world seemed to stop. Caleb stared at her, processing the words, and then joy so intense it was almost painful flooded through him. Really? Are you sure? Really sure. Confirmed by a doctor and everything. I'm 8 weeks along, due in early spring. Lena's hands trembled as she signed. I know we didn't plan this. I know it's fast, but Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she squeaked in protest. It's perfect, he said against her hair. It's absolutely perfect. Maisie's going to lose her mind. You think she'll be okay with it? Having a sibling? She's going to be thrilled. She's been asking when we're going to expand the family for months now. He pulled back to look at Lena's face. How do you feel about it? Honestly? Scared, Lena admitted. Being pregnant is going to be different for me than for hearing women. I won't hear the heartbeat the same way. I'll need different accommodations. And I'm terrified about being a mother, about whether I'm capable of it. You're already a mother, Caleb reminded her. Maisie thinks of you that way, calls you mom when she's talking about us, and you're amazing at it. That's different. Maisie was already partially raised when I came along. This will be from the beginning.
And we'll figure it out together, Caleb promised. Just like we figured out everything else. One day at a time, making mistakes and learning from them, loving this kid the way we love each other and Maisie, completely and without reservation. They drove home in happy silence, both processing the enormity of what this meant. Another child, another person to love and worry about and guide through life. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, exactly like everything else in their relationship. Maisie was still awake when they got home, watching a volcano documentary with Emma in the living room. She looked up when they entered, her face expectant. "Well, how was the anniversary dinner?" "Perfect," Lena signed. "And we have some news." They told her together, watching her face cycle through confusion, understanding, and then explosive joy. "A baby? A real baby? I'm going to be a big sister?" "You are," Caleb confirmed. Maisie launched herself at both of them, hugging them with all the strength her 9-year-old body possessed. "This is the best news ever. Can we name the baby after a volcano, like Krakatoa or Vesuvius?" "We'll take that under advisement," Lena said diplomatically, catching Caleb's eye over Maisie's head. Emma left after offering congratulations and making them promise to call her the next day with more details. Then it was just the three of them, soon to be 4, sitting in their living room talking about the future. Maisie wanted to know everything, when the baby would arrive, whether it would be a boy or girl, if they'd need to move to a bigger house, whether the baby would be able to hear. "We don't know yet if the baby will be deaf or hearing," Lena explained. "My deafness was caused by illness, not genetics, so the baby will probably be able to hear. But if they're deaf, that's okay too. We'll handle it either way." "I hope they're deaf," Maisie said unexpectedly. "Then I can teach them sign language, and they'll be special like you, Mom." The casual way she said it, the complete absence of pity or tragedy in her voice, made Lena tear up for what felt like the 100th time that day. This was what they'd built, a family where difference was celebrated rather than mourned, where disability was just another fact of life rather than something to overcome. The months that followed were a blur of doctor's appointments and preparation. They converted the spare room into a nursery, Maisie insisting on a volcano theme that Lena modified into something slightly more subtle. They told friends and family, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about how they'd manage with a newborn and a 9-year-old. They attended classes on infant care, Lena working with her doctor to ensure she had the visual and tactile monitors she'd need to care for a baby she might not hear crying. In March, their daughter arrived. They named her Sarah Elena Hart. Sarah for Caleb's first wife, Elena, as a variation of Lena's name. Maisie had lobbied hard for Vesuvius as a middle name, but they'd gently declined. The first night home from the hospital, Caleb stood in the nursery holding his daughter, while Lena slept and Maisie supervised from the doorway. Sarah was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that hadn't yet decided what color they'd be. She'd passed her hearing test at the hospital, but Caleb knew that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she was healthy and loved and part of their family. "She's so small," Maisie whispered, joining him to stare at her new sister. "Was I that small?" "Smaller, actually. You were a preemie, remember?" "Are you scared? About having another baby to take care of?" "Terrified," Caleb admitted, "but in a good way. The same way I was terrified the first time I held you." "You're going to be great," Maisie said with confidence. "You and Mom both. You're the best parents." Later, with both girls asleep, Caleb climbed into bed beside Lena. She stirred, reaching for him automatically, and he pulled her close. "Thank you," he signed against her shoulder. "For what?" "For everything, for choosing us, for building this life with me, for giving me Sarah, for being exactly who you are." "Thank you for seeing me," Lena signed back, "for really seeing me, from that very first date. I don't think I ever properly thanked you for that." They lay together in the darkness, listening to the house settle around them. From down the hall came the sound of Maisie talking in her sleep about tectonic plates. From the nursery monitor came the soft sounds of Sarah breathing. And here in their bedroom, 2 people who'd found each other in the strangest circumstances held each other and marveled at how far they'd come. 2 years after that first disastrous date at Marcello's, Caleb Hart's life looked nothing like he'd imagined it would. He had a wife he adored, Two daughters who filled his days with chaos and joy, a career that challenged and fulfilled him. He'd forgiven the coworkers who'd tried to hurt him, had watched them grow into better people. He'd learned that grief could coexist with happiness, that loving someone new didn't diminish what he'd had with Sarah. Most importantly, he'd learned that the worst moments of your life could become the foundation for the best ones. That cruelty could be transformed into grace if you were brave enough to do the transforming. That family wasn't just biology or marriage certificates, but choice and commitment and showing up day after day even when it was hard. On their third anniversary, Caleb and Lena returned to Marcello's one more time. The manager had their table waiting, and this time they brought Maisie with them, leaving Sarah with Emma for the evening. Maisie ordered spaghetti and told them facts about Italian volcanoes while they ate, and Caleb caught Lena's eye across the table, seeing his own contentment reflected back at him. 3 years, Lena signed when Maisie was distracted by her dessert. 3 years since your coworkers tried to ruin your promotion and instead gave you me. Best worst thing that ever happened to us, Caleb agreed. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they hadn't set us up? If we'd met some other way, or not met at all? Sometimes. But then I think about chaos theory, how small actions create massive changes. If they hadn't arranged that date, if I hadn't known sign language, if you hadn't been brave enough to stay when you found out the truth, any one of those things changes and we might not be here. Butterfly effect, Maisie interjected, having clearly been listening. Small changes in initial conditions create large variations in outcome, like how a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can cause a tornado in Texas. Exactly like that, Lena signed, ruffling Maisie's hair. Except in our case, your dad's horrible coworkers flapping their wings in Seattle caused a family in that same Seattle. That's a weird metaphor, Maisie observed. Everything about our story is weird, Caleb said. But it's our weird, and I wouldn't change a single thing. They finished dinner and walked out into the Seattle evening, Maisie between them holding both their hands. The city was alive with Friday night energy. People heading to restaurants and bars and shows, all of them with their own stories of how they'd found their way to each other. And Caleb thought about all the ways life could go wrong, all the traps and schemes and moments of intended cruelty that shaped the world. But he also thought about resilience and redemption and the human capacity for growth. He thought about how his coworkers had learned to be better people, how Lena had chosen to give him a chance despite being used, how Maisie had welcomed a new parent with open arms. He thought about second chances and new beginnings and the beautiful, messy work of building a family from broken pieces. Most of all, he thought about love, how it could survive loss, how it could grow in unexpected places, how it could transform cruelty into grace, how 3 people who'd wanted to hurt him had accidentally led him to the person he was meant to find, how a trap designed to reveal prejudice had instead revealed his capacity for deeper, more honest love than he'd thought possible after Sarah died. As they walked through Seattle under the spring stars, past Marcello's where it had all begun, Caleb Hart felt grateful for every twist and turn that had brought him here. Grateful for the coworkers who'd unwittingly done him the greatest favor. Grateful for Lena's courage in staying when she could have left. Grateful for Maisie's resilience and Sarah's memory and the new life they'd created together. The blind date trap had failed spectacularly, but in its failure, it had given him everything he needed. A partner who challenged and supported him, a family that chose each other daily, and the understanding that the worst moments of your life could become the doorway to the best ones if you were brave enough to walk through. They went home that night, all 3 of them, to the house they'd made into a home, to the life they'd built from intention and love and sheer stubborn determination to be happy. And as Caleb tucked both his daughters into bed and climbed into bed beside his wife, he thought about how grateful he was that 3 people had tried to hurt him that October evening 2 years ago, because without their cruelty, he might never have found his second chance at love. Without their trap, he might never have met the woman who'd help him heal. Without their scheme, his family might still be just him and Maisie, both of them getting by but not quite thriving. Instead, he had this, love and laughter and chaos and joy. He had Lena signing in her sleep, her hands moving through dream conversations. He had Maisie's soft breathing from down the hall, peaceful and content. He had Sarah Elena, his newest daughter,
making the small sounds of infant sleep from the nursery. He had a life full of meaning and purpose and connection. He had, against all odds and in the strangest possible way, found his way home. And that, Caleb thought as sleep finally claimed him, was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here, worth the trap and the confrontation and the risk of loving again. Worth all of it, because the alternative was living half a life, and he'd done that for long enough. Now, finally, he was fully alive again. And it had all started with a blind date designed to destroy him that had instead become the beginning of everything beautiful in his life. Sometimes, he thought drowsily, the universe worked in mysterious ways. And sometimes those mysterious ways led you exactly where you needed to be, even if the path there was paved with someone else's cruelty. The trap had failed. Love had won. And 3 years later, they were still choosing each other, still building their life together, still grateful for the twisted path that had brought them to each other. That was the real ending, not perfect, not without struggle, but real and true and worth every moment of the journey.